Chapter 659. The person who seized my ancient emperor's saber seemed to be the master of the mystic gate. It wasn't you, right? Marquis Jing Huanho said calmly. Blazing yang qi emanated from his body like a furnace in the earth's core. Xiao Yan smiled coldly. I don't want your Dharma treasure. Leave your life behind. Marquis Jing Huanho smiled. There's no point in saying so much nonsense. We still have to see who's more powerful. As he spoke, a voice suddenly came from afar. Liang'an, stand down. You are not just representing yourself, but also the great Zhou. The voice was calm and dignified. It was the voice of the great Zhou dynasty's crown prince, Liang Yuan. The corner of Marquis Jing Huanho's mouth twitched. There was a faint smile on his face. He had never thought much of Crown Prince Liang Yuan. Liang Yuan said indifferently, You still haven't explained what happened 3 years ago. Do you think it's over? Marquis Jing Huanho frowned slightly. A moment later, he laughed softly. Forget it. Do as you wish. Fellow Taoist Xiao, please forgive me for what happened today. A light figure landed before Xiao Yan and the others. It was Liang Yuan's dermic projection. He cupped his hands towards Xiao Yan and Zhu Yi. Our two families are now on the same side. Harmony is the most important thing. Please forgive Liang'an for his rudeness. Liang Yuan's expression was calm and filled with sincerity. For this great Zhou crown prince, if he was facing Lin Feng, then no matter how low his stance was, it would not be too much. But facing Xiao Yan, Zhu Yi, and the others, right now his attitude could be said to be extremely soft. However, Xiao Yan, Zhu Yi, Yu Hongyan, and Xiao Zhen would not look down on him because of this. If one really thought about it, Liang Yuan and Xianmen Tianzong did not have a very harmonious relationship. His clone had even clashed with Zhu Yi, Shi Tianhao, and the others in the Kunpeng's treasury. When Zhu Yi went to the Great Zhou for the examination, Liang Yuan had used some tricks. In the end, Zhu Yi had counterattacked and foiled his plan to gather Jia's flames. Zhu Yi had even personally killed a late-stage Yuanying patriarch under his command. The depth of their conflict was not much less than Marquis Jing Huanho's, but Liang Yuan had lowered his stance and eased the conflict. This made Xiao Yan and the others think highly of him. This was because even though Liang Yuan had lowered his stance, he was actually reasonable and restrained. He was modest but not servile, so he didn't lose face for the great Zhou dynasty. Instead, he displayed a magnanimous and tolerant attitude. He had grasped the appropriate limits and was quite experienced. After the tempering of his previous setbacks, the great Zhou crown prince had truly matured. Not only had he left fourth Prince Liang Qian in the dust, unable to shake his position as heir apparent, but Crown Prince Shi Chongyun of the Great Qin dynasty was also far inferior to him. The two were on completely different levels. Putting aside the difference in national strength between the Great Zhou and Great Qin, the Great Zhou dynasty had already won for a while. The disdain in Marquis Jing Huanho's eyes gradually faded. His eyes flickered as he sized up Liang Yuan. He had never thought much of Liang Yuan before. Although he was the crown prince, his talent and contributions were far inferior to his. But now, this change made Marquis Jing Huanho look at Liang Yuan seriously. It was true that Liang Yuan's personal strength was still inferior to his, but at Marquis Jing Huanho and Liang Yuan's current cultivation realm, while the accumulation of magic power was important, it was only a part of the factor. When breaking through to the primordial soul realm, a cultivator's state of mind was equally important. Liang Yuan's talent was not bad, and he had the resources provided by the Great Zhou dynasty. As long as his state of mind improved, it would be far easier for him to break through the bottleneck than others. Xiao Yan and Zhu Yi looked at each other. Xiao Yan looked at Marquis Jing Huanho and said, First, those who come are guests. I, Xianmen Tianzong, will naturally not slight you, but our sect's motto has always been that when guests come, there will be fine wine, and when wolves and wolves come, there will be swords and spears. Whether you are a friend or a foe, think carefully. Marquis Jing Huanho smiled faintly. His gaze swept past Xiao Zhen, and Yu Hongyan before finally landing on Xiao Yan. Silently, he said, "At least during your sex opening ceremony, I will be a qualified guest." Xiao Yan stared at him and chuckled. "You better be a qualified guest." Zhu Yi looked at Liang Yuan. "It is true that peace is valued, but it is always possible to distinguish right from wrong. There is justice in the hearts of men, and we should work together." Liang Yuan said faintly, "Of course." With that, his magic power projection gradually disappeared. Marquis Jing Huanho looked at Xiao Yan one last time and suddenly smiled. "I have some sons under my command who would like to experience the paths, skills, and divine arts of Xianmen Tianzong. Would that be convenient?" Xiao Yan said coldly, "As long as you are willing." Marquis Jing Huanho turned and left. "Better to die in battle than die of old age. None of my sons are cowards." He returned to the guest house assigned to him. It was an independent courtyard. The moment he entered, he saw a group of people guarding the courtyard. The crown prince of the Great Zhou, Liang Yuan, was surrounded by them as he sat on a stone bench in the courtyard. Marquis Jing Huanho was not surprised at all. He said faintly, "This marquis is honored that your highness has come to visit. However, the host is not here, so your highness has entered by yourself. It is unavoidable that you will lose your status and look like a thief." Liang Yuan stared at him and rapped his fingers on the stone table in front of him. "Liangan, it has been 3 years. Have you forgotten that you provoked the phoenix race?" Marquis Jing Huanho sat down across from Liang Yuan. He looked calmly at Liang Yuan without any respect. "Of course I remember." Then you should also remember what you relied on to atone for your crimes back then," Liang Yuan said. Liang Yuan said, "It's been 3 years. Where is the remaining half of the Atlas essence? You couldn't have forgotten what you promised, right?" Marquis Jing Huanho replied unconcernedly, "Of course I remember, but there is still a long time until the promised time. Your Highness is too impatient. I have to admit that your Highness has indeed improved compared to before. At least I will not treat you as trash. However, compared to His Majesty and the Marquis of Xuanji, you are still far off. They will not be so impatient." Liang Yuan was lectured and criticized by Marquis Jing Huanho, but he did not get angry. He said faintly, "I am reminding you out of goodwill. It is fine as long as you know what you are doing." As he finished speaking, he stood up and walked out of the small courtyard. His entourage followed closely behind him without making a sound. "Liangan, those who try to gain favor from both sides often have no place to live in the end. My imperial father is watching your every move. Have more self-respect." When Marquis Jing Huanho heard this, his eyes moved slightly as he watched Crown Prince Liang Yuan walk out of the courtyard. He laughed lightly. "This marquis is not trying to gain favor from both sides. On the contrary, regardless of left or right, everything is under my control." Marquis Jing Huanho clapped his hands. Very quickly, 2 young men came in front of him and calmly looked at him. Although these 2 people were also dressed in military attire and were no different from the soldiers under Marquis Jing Huanho's command, their gazes towards Marquis Jing Huanho were very calm. They did not have the fanaticism and reverence of soldiers towards their commander. The slight reverence was only for Marquis Jing Huanho's cultivation and great strength. "Grandmaster handed you to me, and I brought you into Xianmen Tianzong," Marquis Jing Huanho said faintly. "The opportunity to spar with the disciples of Xianmen Tianzong has already been won for you. Whether or not you can meet the person you are looking for will all depend on your luck." The 2 young men nodded together and bowed. "Thank you, Marquis. Leave the rest to us." Marquis Jing Huanho glanced at them. "Don't blame me for not warning you. Even if you find the person, don't have any ideas here. In the future, find an opportunity when the person is out. If something happens here, Grandmaster will not be able to protect you." One of the tall men calmly said, "Don't worry, Marquis. We know the severity of the situation." Marquis Jing Huanho waved his hand, and the 2 immediately withdrew. Next, This Marquis will just watch the show in peace. Marquis Jing Huanhou stood up. There are many beauties in Xianmen. Unfortunately, it's difficult to get a hold of them in such a short time. But that's fine. The more it's like this, the more interested I am. If it's too easy to obtain, it'll be boring. He slightly furrowed his brows, the expression on his face was like a smile that wasn't a smile. I was thinking of raising pigs before, now that Xiao Yan is already ridiculously fat, it's time to find a chance to slaughter him, or else fat pigs will learn to fly to the sky. Putting aside Marquis Jing Huanhou's plans, the great Zhou's crown prince, Liang Yuan, left Marquis Jing Huanhou's small courtyard. Escorted by his entourage, he walked back to his residence. As he walked, Liang Yuan used his dermic power to send a voice transmission to the person beside him. Ask about the progress of the hidden pawn we buried in Xianmen. A Yuanian cultivator beside him nodded silently and left the group. After secretly burying a transmission crystal and leaving a mark, the Yuanian cultivator left as if nothing had happened and returned to Crown Prince Liang Yuan's residence. After entering the room, Liang Yuan sat at the seat of honor. The Yuanian cultivator said, "Now, let's see when the hidden pawn can obtain the transmission crystal. This isn't Yujing Mountain, so Xianmen surveillance should be lax. The hidden pawn has successfully become a true disciple of Xianmen, but Xianmen has sent true disciples to Kunlun Mountain as receptionists. It's hard to say when he will return to Cloud Peak and find the transmission crystal." Liang Yuan said, "It's fine. I have enough patience." Before he finished speaking, the Yuanian cultivator's expression suddenly changed. "Your Highness, there's a response." He took out a transmission crystal and infused it with his dermic power. After sensing it, he nodded. It wasn't discovered by anyone else in Xianmen. It can be confirmed that the hidden pawn is contacting us. Liang Yuan waved his hand. "Connect." The Yuanian cultivator connected. A moment later, a voice came from the other side. "It's me. What's your current situation? How's the progress of the mission?" The Yuanian cultivator didn't waste time with pleasantries. He went straight to the point and asked the most crucial question. The other side answered, "My situation is good. Everything is as usual. It's just that the matter you've given me is difficult to carry out. The sect's foundation orthodoxy is called the 8 trigram scripture of the Great Way of the Heavens. Only my master and the others, who are also the founder's direct disciples, can learn it. Although the Dharma that I and the other true disciples practice is also a secret technique of the sect, it was deduced by my master and the others based on the 8 trigram scripture of the Great Way of the Heavens and their own Dharma cultivation. Although it's profound and abstruse, my master once said that it's impossible to reverse the 8 trigram scripture of the Great Way of the Heavens with this technique." I can see that he wasn't lying. The Yuanian cultivator frowned. The foundation orthodoxy of the Great Way of the sect must continue to be passed down. It can't be broken in your master's generation. The other side's voice was a little erratic. "That's right. I've heard that the sect's internal competition this time is to decide the most outstanding disciple among the true disciples of each branch to be appointed as the head disciple. Although I can't be sure, the head disciple is most likely to inherit the legacy of my master and the others. He might be able to inherit the sect's foundation orthodoxy." Chapter 660. Xiao Yan, Zhu Yi, and the others want to become head disciples. The Yuanian cultivator's expression changed. "This is an important piece of information." He thought for a moment, then asked with a frown, "Every branch will have a head disciple?" "However, as far as I know, the 8 direct disciples of the Celestial Sect of Wonders. Not all of them opened their doors to accept disciples. Some of them had many true disciples. Some of them only had 1 or 2 disciples. Or even none at all. Those who haven't accepted disciples don't count, but those who only have 1 or 2 direct disciples, won't they have no choice if they want to become head disciples?" A voice came from the other side. "In the future, there will be foundation disciples who will continue to become direct disciples. If there is no suitable candidate, then they will most likely not have a head disciple until a sufficiently outstanding candidate appears. The Yuanying cultivator immediately asked, "How can you become a head disciple? How confident are you?" The other side was silent for a moment, then answered, "Daily performance is an important point. In addition, this internal sect competition is also an important point. Other than sparring with fellow sect members, there will also be sparring with the young geniuses of other factions. My master and the others will observe the entire process and consider everything. The one with the best performance will stand out." The Yuanying cultivator looked at Crown Prince Liang Yuan. Liang Yuan's expression was calm as he slightly waved his hand. The Yuanying cultivator nodded and thought for a moment, then said, "Do your best to prepare. When the time comes, just use your full strength. You don't need to worry about anything else. We will make arrangements for sparring with the young geniuses of the great Zhou dynasty and other factions. We will definitely help you ascend to the head disciple position of your branch. The rest is up to you." What he meant was that not only could the great Zhou dynasty make arrangements, but the other factions also had room to maneuver. The person on the other side was clearly a bit surprised, but he quickly calmed down and replied, "I understand." After ending the communication, the Yuanying cultivator turned to look at Liang Yuan and hesitantly asked, "Your Highness, is it worth using so many resources?" Liang Yuan didn't immediately reply and was slightly lost in thought. He remembered what his father, Emperor Zhou Yangpan, had said to him before he left for Kunlun Mountain. The content was simple, but it deeply moved Liang Yuan. Beyond the great void is Xianmen Tianzong. Liang Yuan once again mulled over Liang Pan's words in his heart. After a long while, he let out a long breath and looked at his subordinates before him. He calmly said, "Just do as I say." Everyone bowed in unison, "We will obey your Highness's orders." 2 days passed quickly. On the cloud peak, Xiao Yan and the others received the guests. All the guests on the invitation list had arrived. The brothers gathered together. Xiao Yan looked at Zhu Yi, Yu Hongyan, and Li Yuanfang, and said, "Most of the guests have arrived. Sixth brother, go to the Yinyang Sea and check on little sister. According to my estimation, she will come out soon." Li Yuanfang said solemnly, "Yes, eldest brother." On Mount Yujing, Li Yuanfang came to the edge of the cliff. Below him was a 1,000-foot-deep abyss. The Black Sea roared continuously. It was the Yinyang Sea. He jumped off the cliff into the Black Sea and dove deep into the sea. Halfway there, Li Yuanfang felt a majestic demonic power floating in front of him. He stopped and cupped his fists. "Greetings, Senior Wu Tong." In the pitch-black sea in front of Li Yuanfang, a figure gradually appeared. As he got closer, he could see that it was a black-clothed youth. His appearance was ordinary, and he looked very ordinary. He had a pair of eyes that only had white in them, and he looked a little scary. The young man in black was the human form of a fish without eyes. He was called Wu Tong. He was a little startled and cupped his fists at Li Yuanfang. "Greetings. Senior, where is my junior sister now?" Li Yuanfang asked. Wu Tong said, "Follow me." He immediately turned around and walked. Li Yuanfang hurriedly followed. The two of them moved forward in the pitch-black sea. Soon, a huge whirlpool appeared in front of them. The seawater kept spinning. The whirlpool was formed because thousands of golden-eyed black fish were swimming together at high speed. It was as if they had formed a huge ring-shaped wall. When Wu Tong arrived, these golden-eyed black fish were all shocked and their swimming speed slowed down. Wu Tong waved at them. "Continue, don't stop." At his command, these golden-eyed black fish sped up again and continued to swim in a circular pattern. In the center of the whirlpool formed by these black fish, there was a vague silhouette of a person. Li Yuanfang looked at it carefully. Slowly, he nodded and solemnly bowed to Wu Tong. "Senior, thank you for taking care of my junior sister these days." Wu Tong shook his head. "It's no trouble at all. Her cultivation is also beneficial to my people. As the two of them were talking, they saw that the whirlpool in front of them suddenly became more turbulent. A huge suction came from the center of the whirlpool. Wu Tong looked in that direction with his pupilless eyes. With a thought, the golden-eyed black fish that were still swimming around suddenly dispersed. A large amount of black seawater was sucked into the body of the figure in the center of the whirlpool. The next moment, the turbulent yin-yang sea suddenly calmed down. The figure, who was sitting cross-legged, stood up. His whole body emitted a bright light. Although the light was constantly being swallowed by the dark seawater, Li Yuanfang and Wu Tong could still see the person under the light. It was a young girl in purple. She looked no more than 14 or 15 years old. The childishness on her face had not completely faded, but she was beautiful and admirable. The young girl was Lin Feng's youngest disciple, Luo Qinggu. Over the years, as she grew older, she also grew taller. From a little girl with short legs, she grew into a slender and elegant woman. When she saw Li Yuanfang, a cheerful smile appeared on her face. "Senior brother Yuanfang." Li Yuanfang nodded. "Junior sister, congratulations on your success." Luo Qinggu smiled brightly. She came in front of Wu Tong and Li Yuanfang. She bowed to Wu Tong first. "Senior, you have worked hard these days. Xiao Wu can't thank you enough." Wu Tong waved her hand in a daze. "Don't mention it. It's nothing for me. I have been teaching my people in the Yin-Yang Sea. Thank you anyway." Luo Qinggu smiled. She counted the time and cheered. "Fortunately, it's not too late. I finished before the opening ceremony." Li Yuanfang nodded and said seriously, "Of course it's not too late. It's a total of 80 days and 16 hours. It's 8 hours earlier than expected." Luo Qinggu raised her head proudly. "Xiao Wu is still very hard-working." Li Yuanfang said, "You have to work even harder." Luo Qinggu shrunk her neck and said obediently, "Yes, senior brother Yuanfang. Let's go. The opening ceremony is just around the corner. There's no need for you to entertain the guests. Go back to your own cave, nourish your mana, and strengthen your foundation. It'll be good for your body as well. Don't get too tired." As Li Yuanfang spoke, he turned to look at pupilless. "Senior, we'll be leaving now." Luo Qinggu also looked at Wu Tong and the numerous golden-eyed black fish behind him. She said with a smile, "Senior, Xiao Wu will come back to see you and everyone else in a few days." Wu Tong said with a smile, "No hurry, no hurry." Li Yuanfang and Luo Qinggu left the Yin-Yang Sea together and landed on the peak of Yujing Mountain. Luo Qinggu stretched and said cheerfully, "I wonder if anyone will choose Xiao Wu as their master this time." Li Yuanfang didn't say anything. He usually wouldn't express his opinion on such uncertain matters. Luo Qinggu was also familiar with this sixth senior brother's character, so she simply sighed. She looked at the vast void and said, "Now only little senior brother hasn't returned to the mountain." Li Yuanfang said, "We've communicated before. Tianhao said he would come back on time for the opening ceremony." Luo Qinggu looked down. Although she couldn't see Yunfeng, her gaze still fell there. There must be a lot of guests this time, right? Senior brother Xiao Yan, senior brother Zhu Yi, and senior sister Hong Yan must be very busy. Xiao Wu should go down and help. Li Yuanfang shook his head. The guests have basically been arranged. Busy, mainly for the past few days. Luo Qinggu nodded. In the blink of an eye, it was the next morning. The sun rose from the east, and the clouds on Kunlun Mountain dispersed. The day of the third opening ceremony of Xianmen Tianzong had finally arrived. On Yunfeng, in the guest house behind the main hall, guests from all over the world also left their residences and walked towards the main hall. Chu Yang walked in the Beyond Heaven Mountain team, following Wu Yunliang, Meng Chaoran, and the others. As he walked, he once again looked at the scene on Yunfeng. Behind the main hall was the guest house, and in front of the main entrance was an open space with a huge taiji pattern printed on it. Yin and yang blended together, and black and white opposed each other. Usually, when the sect had something to do, the foundation disciples of Xianmen Tianzong would gather here and wait for the summons. At the same time, this was also a place for the foundation disciples to learn from each other and exchange Dao techniques. It was similar to the main training ground. Ahead of the main training ground was the gate of Yunfeng. After leaving the gate, one could go down the mountain by following the heart-reflecting stairs. On the right side of the main training ground was the place where the foundation disciples usually lived. There were many houses, and each person had a single room. There was a small spiritual formation in the room. Although the effect was not as good as the Time Light Hall on Yujing Mountain, it still had the effect of gathering spiritual energy. Cultivating inside was twice the result with half the effort. On the left side of the main training ground was also a group of buildings. There were many small buildings, and each small building had its own space. There were medicinal pills, magic tools, talismans, and so on. Of course, the quality of the things inside was relatively low. However, although the benefits of the foundation disciples of Xianmen Tianzong were not as good as that of the true disciples, as long as they cultivated to a certain level, the sect would give them corresponding rewards. Compared to the younger disciples of other forces, the rewards were already quite generous. As Chu Yang looked around, he secretly nodded his head. He came to the same conclusion as Shi Xingyun, not to mention Yujing Mountain. This Yunfeng is also quite impressive. As he was thinking, the sky above his head started to shake. A vast purple aura swept across. The Jade Mountain and the Black Sea escaped from the void and descended into the boundless universe. Chapter 661. Everyone came to the central hall of Cloud Peak together. The hall looked vast from the outside and the space inside had been expanded. Many powers and thousands of cultivators entered, but it didn't feel crowded at all. Instead, it seemed extremely spacious. On the main seat of the hall sat a youth wearing purple robes. It was Lin Feng, but it wasn't Lin Feng himself but his magic power projection. Marquis Jing Huanliang had already arrived in the hall. He looked around and suddenly saw Marquis Xuanji Zhu Hongguo. Zhu Hongguo's expression was indifferent as he stood together with Crown Prince Liang Yuan. However, the place he was at was like the center of the world and would involuntarily attract the attention of other people. In the entire hall, only the people near Taishu Temple's Lin Daohan, Qin Emperor's Stonefeather's clone and Lin Feng's magic power projection were exempt. Marquis Jing Huan came in front of Zhu Hongguo and Liang Yuan and said indifferently, "I thought Marquis Xuanji had already left the mountain." With these words, not only Liang Yuan, even Sword Venerable Jade Wave and the head of the Lei family Lei Lai slightly frowned. On the contrary, Zhu Hongguo's expression was calm. "You judged wrongly, your cultivation is still far from enough." "I indeed judged wrongly." Marquis Jing Huan smiled faintly, "because I thought that for a martial artist like Marquis Xuanji to be able to come this far, he must have an indomitable nature and would rather break than bend. Knowing that he is no match for the master of Xian Gate, once he is humiliated, he will still fight." Zhu Hongguo's hands were behind his back and his body was very relaxed. "I agree that the master of Xian Gate is very strong. However, whether or not I am no match will only be known after we fight. Without fighting, everything is unknown. No matter how strong the opponent is, I won't lose the courage to fight. This is my martial Dao belief. However, this time at Kunlun Mountain, I won't fight the master of Xian Gate." Zhu Hongguo's eyelids drooped and he didn't even look in Lin Feng's direction as if he was afraid. But including Marquis Jing Huan, everyone could feel that the current Zhu Hongguo was extremely dangerous. He didn't look at Lin Feng because he was suppressing his urge to fight. "No matter if I win or lose, I will find an explanation for the humiliation this time, but it definitely won't be now." Zhu Hongguo's tone was indifferent. "Liangan, your little tricks are far from enough to break my confidence. Be the spear of the great Zhou with peace of mind. Don't have any other thoughts. I can tolerate you. Otherwise, you should know the various mistakes you have committed. According to the laws of Zhou, you should be executed 1,000 times over. His tone was extremely calm, but the Marquis of Jinghuan could feel the enormous pressure. However, his state of mind was still calm and he nodded his head unhurriedly. I admit that right now there is a gap between me and the Marquis of Xuanji. However, there will be a day when this gap can be made up. At that time, we can have a long talk. So as to avoid the suspicion of the Marquis of Xuanji bullying the weak and fearing the strong like now. Zhu Hongwu remained unmoved by Marquis Jinghuan's ridicule. His emotions didn't change at all. He only glanced at Marquis Jinghuan indifferently and calmly said, "Liang'an, you're very stupid. You should know that psychological tricks are useless against me, and I can't be your protective talisman. Just like that unfilial son of mine, Zhu Yi. I won't kill you because now is not the time. If I want to kill you, it doesn't matter if you become a primordial spirit or not." Zhu Hongwu said indifferently, "That unfilial son thinks that he has the protection of the master of the Taoist sect and you also think that you have more than one backer. However, you don't know that I've never cared about your backers. If I want to kill you, then I'll kill you. If your backers want to come find me, then that's something that will happen after I kill you." The unfilial son thought that the reason he was able to escape in Tianjing City was because of Lin Feng's divine ability. However, it was also because the time wasn't right. It's laughable that he was still complacent, just like you right now. After Zhu Hongwu finished speaking, he shook his head and moved his gaze away. He couldn't be bothered to look at the Marquis of Jinghuan any longer. When the Marquis of Jinghuan heard Zhu Hongwu's words, he was still calm. Only when Zhu Hongwu said that he had more than one backer did the Marquis of Jinghuan's eyebrows slightly move. However, he didn't say anything. Silently, he stood where he was. Zhu Hongwu moved his gaze away. The Marquis of Jinghuan laughed softly and turned his gaze elsewhere. It was as if the conversation between the two had never happened. The expressions of Crown Prince Liang Yuan, Sword Venerable Jade Wave, and Lei Lai didn't change. It was as if they hadn't heard anything. The projection of Lin Feng's magic power sat on the main seat. He calmly looked at the scene in the great hall that appeared calm but was actually surging with undercurrents. His expression was tranquil and he didn't say a word. He only returned the greeting when others greeted him. The rest of the time, he was like a wooden statue. After all the guests had arrived, Lin Feng smiled slightly. "Welcome, fellow Taoists, to my Kunlun Mountain to attend the ceremony." The Qin Emperor, Stone Feather, said indifferently, "We share the honor of such a grand event." Lin Feng smiled and nodded. He looked at Xiao Yan standing in front of him. Xiao Yan immediately took a step forward and drew a line in the air with his finger. His magic power transformed into an illusion of light and shadow. The scene in the illusion changed, revealing the scene below the clouds and the foot of the mountain. At this moment, Zhu Yi was standing at the foot of the mountain. In front of him, there were hundreds of people. It was a dense mass of people. They were all people who wanted to join the celestial sect of wonders. This is still the number of people after a large-scale screening. Before this, Xiao Yan, Zhu Yi and the rest were scattered all over the place, separately setting up points at different places to accept people who want to be apprenticed to a master. They have already gone through a screening and selection, dismissing the majority of the people. Only then did they bring the preliminary qualified people back to Kunlun Mountain. The few of them summed up their harvests and came up with these several hundred people. Although the number of people was more than the previous two opening ceremonies, the quality was further improved. After 3 years of accumulation, the atmosphere of Xianmen Tianzong's holy land had become more and more intense. Many young talents dreamed of becoming disciples of Xianmen Tianzong. This time, the assessment under the clouds would definitely be more refined. Lin Feng said indifferently, "Let's begin." His voice was not loud, but it directly resounded within a 10,000-mile radius of Kunlun Mountain. At the foot of the mountain, Zhu Yi looked at the crowd of people who wanted to become disciples and said, "In front of you is our sect's heart-reflecting stairs. It is specially used to test new disciples. Every disciple has to go through it before becoming a disciple. Those who can reach the top of the stairs can become disciples of Xianmen Tianzong, but there is a time limit. If you don't reach the top of the mountain after a day, you can't enter the sect. You have to go back and wait for the next opportunity. Zhu Yi's gaze crossed the wide surface of Mirror Lake and looked at the cloud mirror city on the other side. You come from all over the world. If you want to continue to try the heart-reflecting stairs test in the future, you can find a place to live in the cloud mirror city on the other side of the lake. Everything is up to you. Zhu Yi dusted his sleeves. If there are no problems, you can start climbing the mountain now. The heart-reflecting stairs of Xianmen Tianzong could be considered famous now. This staircase was formed by the mana of Patriarch Lin Feng. It had its own spirituality and was not controlled by humans. It was fair, but it was difficult to use tricks. There was no secret to climbing the mountain. After a few practical tests of accepting disciples, Lin Feng also constantly improved the heart-reflecting stairs, making its functions more complete and detailed, so that he could select the most outstanding talents for the sect. On the heart-reflecting stairs, everything depended on one's true ability. If one could pass it, then they could pass it. If one could not, then they could not. Even if there were acquaintances in the sect, they could not help. This was because the test of the heart-reflecting stairs was independent for each person. There was no experience to speak of, and there was no tool that could help. The mana of a mighty primordial soul could help in cheating, but with supernatural power and mana of this level, Lin Feng would detect it at the first moment. There was still no possibility of getting away with it. Because there was no actual person in charge, things like going through the back door, relying on connections, or relying on favors were all not useful. In the hall at the top of the cloud peak, Lin Feng sat calmly. The group of guests also sat in their seats. Silently, they looked at the illusion of light and shadow in midair in the hall. With the help of Lin Feng's mana, this illusion of light and shadow created by Xiao Yan split into hundreds, perfectly showing everything in the heart-reflecting stairs. Silently, everyone looked at the group of disciples falling into strange and dazzling illusions that originated from the deepest emotions in their hearts. After watching for a while, Xiao Yan revealed a slight smile at the corner of his mouth. He transmitted his voice to Lin Feng. "Master, there are good seedlings this time." Lin Feng smiled slightly. "Indeed, the harvest is great." The others were not very clear about the specific evaluation criteria of the heart-reflecting stairs, but those with a discerning eye could see that among the disciples who participated in the test, there were indeed people with outstanding talent, and their performance was obviously better than the others. Xianmen Tianzong's foundation is becoming more and more solid. Many people muttered in their hearts. Some cultivators from small and medium forces, on the other hand, focused their attention on the disciples who were more lagging behind. They thought that if they were eliminated by Xianmen Tianzong's test, their own sects would have a chance to pick up the slack. Everyone had a myriad of thoughts. Lei Lai, the head of the Lei family, had a wooden expression, but an imperceptible haze flashed through the depths of his eyes. His line of sight seemed to be unintentional, but it was actually focused on a single figure. After a long time, he sighed softly and used his transcendence energy to transmit his voice to Zhu Hongwu and Crown Prince Liang Yuan. "He is among these people." Zhu Hongwu's expression was calm and leisurely as he examined the hundreds of images. Crown Prince Liang Yuan asked, "Which one?" Silently, Lei Lai said, "The one in first place." Liang Yuan's voice paused slightly. Xianmen Tianzong's heart-reflecting stairs is rumored to be extremely difficult. Looking at it now, it seems that the rumors are not false. This person is still able to have such an outstanding performance. It seems that your initial prediction, Lei Qingjia, was correct. Lei Lai said, "But now that he has entered Xianmen Tianzong, the matter will probably be difficult." "We have to do it even if it's difficult," Zhu Hongwu said at this time. Liang Yuan nodded. "There is still a lot of time." Slowly, Lei Qingjia, try to move him with emotion. Perhaps it will be effective. After all, he is your grandson. Lei Lai fell silent and did not speak for a long time. The heart-reflecting stairs, as a test, was equivalent to another round of careful selection. It was especially a test of one's temperament, completely eliminating those with ill intentions. After the heart-reflecting stairs reputation, there were actually very few people who tried to mix in. However, there were a few people who hoped to get lucky, but in the end, they only humiliated themselves. After a preliminary selection by Xiao Yan, Zhu Yi, and the others, the talents of this batch of disciples were more impressive. The cultivators of the other factions looked at this batch of new disciples and mostly fell into silence. The quality of the disciples was getting higher, and the number of talented people who came because of the fame of Xianmen Tianzong was getting higher and higher in the Divine Land, and its influence was getting greater and greater. Chapter 662. Finally, someone was the first to pass the heart-reflecting staircase and set foot on the top of the cloud peak. However, two people arrived at the same time. One was a 15-year-old youth with an imposing appearance. His eyes contained calmness and sharpness at the same time. His entire person exuded a firm and unyielding temperament. He was already in the early stage of the foundation establishment realm. Lei Lai, the head of the Lei family, looked at this youth in silence. The other person was an even younger youth. His eyes were extremely lively, and he looked less than 10 years old. He wore a purple robe. Although the style was different from that of the disciples of Xianmen Tianzong, the quality was the same. This inevitably made people suspect whether this little boy had gone through the back door. However, in fact, the people who were brought to Kunlun Mountain with him all knew that this was actually because when he first came to be apprenticed, although he had delicate features, he was dirty from head to toe and his clothes were ragged. He was completely like a little beggar. After he passed Zhu Yi's test, Zhu Yi let him freshen up and buy him a new set of clothes. Then, he was brought back to Kunlun Mountain with the others. These two people were the first to arrive at the top of the cloud peak. They saw that Li Yuanfang was already waiting there. He was specially responsible for receiving the disciples who passed the heart-reflecting staircase test. After that, other people successively reached the top of the mountain and passed the test. In the end, there were a total of 300 people who passed the selection. This was also the highest number in the history of Xianmen Tianzong's opening ceremony. Xiao Yan went out of the central hall and met up with Li Yuanfang. He lectured this group of disciples, explaining to them all kinds of basic instructions and sect rules and precepts. Zhu Yi entered the heart-reflecting staircase and brought out the apprentices who were still stuck inside and failed the test. He sent them back to the cloud peak. Outside the gate, there would be an outer sanctum of Xianmen Tianzong to send them across the Mirror Lake and back to Cloud Mirror City. After returning to Cloud Mirror City, it was up to these apprentices to decide their own plans. If they wanted to stay in Cloud Mirror City and find a chance to take the test, Xianmen Tianzong would give them some convenience and help them find a place to stay in Cloud Mirror City. Zhu Yi returned to the mountain and the disciples who passed the test, under the lead of him, Xiao Yan and the rest, entered the central hall at the peak of the mountain. After paying respects to ancestor Lin Feng, they officially became the new batch of foundation disciples of the celestial sect of Xian. After the ceremony, these new foundation disciples were led out of the central hall and then to the left side of the drill ground. There was a row of small buildings that supplied foundation disciples with elixirs, talismans, and clothes. When the new foundation disciples of the Celestial Sect of Wonders first entered the sect would issue them special clothing, a token that indicated their identity, a certain number of pills, and a certain number of protective talismans. After the opening ceremony, Xiao Yan, Zhu Yi, and the others would give lectures and officially impart the laws of Tao after the opening ceremony. After the ceremony, it would be the internal sect competition of Xianmen Tianzong, as well as the Dharma exchange. This was also something that cultivators from other forces paid more attention to. Naturally, new foundation disciples did not need to participate in these things, but it did not mean that they had nothing to do with it. After settling their personal belongings and changing into the sect's uniform, the new rookies would watch the sect competition and the Dharma exchange with their senior brothers and sisters who were also foundation disciples. Although some of them had not cultivated qi and might not even have a clear understanding of the cultivation world, this kind of activity was undoubtedly of great help. In terms of broadening their horizons and increasing their strength, there was no doubt that this was a huge help. The group of foundation disciples naturally knew what was good for them. They understood that this was a rare opportunity. Everyone hurriedly packed up and got ready. In the central hall, after the ceremony of apprenticeship, Xiao Yan, Zhu Yi, and the others looked at Lin Feng and bowed together. Then, they disappeared from the hall. In the next moment, on the large drill ground in front of the hall that was imprinted with a huge Tai Chi diagram, there was a flash of light and a few figures appeared. They were the true disciples of Xianmen Tianzong who had already entered the sect. The team was divided into 8 groups, standing in 8 different directions around the center of the drill ground. At the front of the team, which was also close to the center of the drill ground, stood 7 people. One of them was a valiant young man. It was Lin Feng's first disciple, Xiao Yan. Behind him, gathered a group of true disciples under Fen Tianya. Every one of them had a flying flame embroidered on their sleeves. The gazes of the guests in the hall couldn't help but land on the direct disciples behind Xiao Yan, examining their cultivation levels. A group of primordial spirit experts and Yuanying patriarchs could naturally see the cultivation levels of these junior disciples, as well as their approximate ages. Comparing the two, most people were secretly shocked. Although they have all stayed in a space with accelerated time and cultivated for more than 3 to 5 years, it was not too long. Most of them had cultivated for less than 10 years. Those who have cultivated for more than 5 years have all reached the foundation establishment stage. At this level, in the Divine Land, I'm afraid only Taishu Temple has such a large group of disciples. Other sects, including the Shushan Sword sect, probably do not have such a high probability. Honorable Swordsman Emerald Wave's eyebrows moved. Although it was an estimate, with his eyesight, these juniors would not have too big of a difference. Cultivating for 5 years, opening the Qi Si and establishing the Tao Foundation. This kind of cultivation speed is very rare, but it can't be said to be very shocking. Some of the larger sects and powers in the human cultivation world still have such outstanding disciples. Small to medium-sized sects, even some loose cultivator sects, or some lower-level places can also have a sudden burst of luck. A genius-level figure suddenly popped out. For example, Xiao Yan himself. Back then in Wuzhou City's Xiao family, a small third-rate cultivation family, in 4 years he worked hard to cultivate to the great perfection of Qi disciple. He was only 1 step away from foundation establishment. Although it is a small probability event, it does not mean it is impossible. But on the other hand, since it is a small probability event, it means it is not common. Even if one appears in a large sect, if it is not a special encounter but a normal success in cultivation, then they will immediately be valued by the sect and included in the observation list of key grooming. And the Xianmen Tianzong in front of him, as long as it is a true disciple, as long as they cultivate for more than 5 years, they are all at the foundation establishment stage. Even though the great Qin dynasty's Tao master Chang Lu still had a smile on his face, his gaze was also carefully observing. He saw that right next to Xiao Yan's body stood a little girl. She looked to be no older than 7 or 8 years old, impressively also at foundation establishment stage. At such a young age, everyone who noticed her felt their hearts skip a beat. Damn, could it be that Xianmen Tianzong is going to produce another figure like Shi Tianhao? Looking to the side, not far from Xiao Yan stood a purple-robed scholar. It is Lin Feng's second disciple, Zhu Yi. Behind Zhu Yi, a group of true disciples of the Qian Tian Palace neatly lined up in 3 horizontal rows, like the Qian hexagram pattern of the 8 trigrams. On their sleeves, there are also 3 black horizontal lines, the same as the Qian hexagram pattern, clearly indicating their origin in the Qian Tian Palace. The number of disciples in the Qian Tian Palace is more than that of the true disciples under Xiao Yan and Fen Tianya. At the same time, it is also the branch with the largest number of true disciples among the various branches of Xianmen Tianzong. What the big shots are concerned about is that the Qian Tian Palace not only has the largest number of cultivators, but also the best quality. The number of cultivators who are at the early foundation establishment stage and above is the highest. No matter which branch the Xianmen Tianzong disciples are from, the Qi refinement stage cultivators all practice the Ez Bagua Daoist canon, and then there is a difference in the foundation establishment stage. The Qian Tian Palace's 8 trigrams evolution Saint Golden Stamp and the Ez Bagua Daoist canon are of the same origin, so in this aspect, they have a slight advantage. Continuing to the left, the person in front is a young man in purple with a head full of white hair. The young man stood there silently, looking extremely ordinary, but the cultivators of other forces, who are below the primordial spirit stage, all feel a chill in their hearts when they look at this young man. This is because this young man is the third disciple of the Xian sect master, Lin Feng, Wang Lin. At the same time, he is also publicly recognized as the person with the heaviest killing intent among Lin Feng's disciples. Back then, when he was still in the later stages of the Golden Elixir, in the Void battlefield, he killed a few elders of the Yuanying stage with a few light points of his finger, killing the Yuanying stage like killing chickens and dogs. After that, he used the Bridge of Helplessness to blind the dual-pupiled person, Shitiani, and directly broke the legend of the dual-pupiled person's invincibility. Now, Wang Lin has already reached the middle stages of the Yuanying stage. What kind of cultivation is this? Behind him stands a group of direct disciples of Mortal Forest residents. Their sleeves are all embroidered with a half-black and half-white pattern, not a Tai Chi, but a neat black and white semicircle. The number of people is basically similar to that under Xiao Yan and Fen Tianya, but on average, their cultivation is slightly weaker. However, the most eye-catching is the woman behind Wang Lin. Her jet black hair is straight and scattered behind her, her skin is snow-white, and her appearance is cold and elegant. It was Dao Yuding. What attracted people's attention was not her appearance, but her cultivation level. Middle stages of the Golden Elixir stage. Among the second-generation direct disciples of Xianmen Tianzong, she has the highest cultivation. Although the group of primordial spirit stage big shots can see that this woman has also cultivated for more than 3 years, and should have just passed the Yin fire tribulation, and advanced to the middle stages of the Golden Elixir stage, but considering her age, many people paid attention. This is because Dao Yuding actually has a slight possibility of fighting to form the Yuanying stage within 50 years. This can't help but attract attention. The group of primordial spirit stage big shots have been around for a long time. In their long lives, they have seen all kinds of geniuses. Ordinary people can't attract their attention at all. However, a genius who has the hope of forming the nascent soul within 50 years will definitely attract their attention. If it is an ordinary sect cultivator, then it is fine, but Xianmen Tianzong has such a genius, the meaning is completely different. There is an old saying, geniuses who die young are not considered geniuses. Geniuses who can completely transform their own potential into real strength, and step onto the stage of the divine land, are the truly valuable geniuses. The Taishu Temple is known as the concentration camp of geniuses. A very important factor is that most of the disciples accepted by it can grow to the expected height, the top path techniques, the sect resources, and the protection of the masters of the sect, so that the genius disciples can fully display their talents, and at the same time, the risk of dying young is reduced to the minimum. And now that Dao Yuding is in Xianmen Tianzong, as well as the possibility of dying young, as long as there are no accidents, there is no possibility of dying young. Don't think that she is only in the middle stages of the Golden Elixir stage, but her bright future is almost clearly displayed in front of everyone. Everyone looked at Wang Lin standing in front of Dao Yuding, then looked at the central hall, and looked at the smiling Lin Feng, subconsciously shaking their heads. In the camp of the great Zhou dynasty, a low-profile young man with a humble smile on his face looked at Dao Yuding for a moment, then moved his eyes away, the palm hidden in his sleeve gradually clenched into a fist. Chapter 663. Although the young man's eyes didn't reveal anything, his emotions couldn't help but fluctuate a little. This slight fluctuation caused the eyes of Crown Prince Liang Yuan, who was at the front of the great Zhou dynasty's camp, to flash slightly. His magic power condensed into a line and his voice sounded in the young man's heart, Minister Song, if you always have this state of mind, you will never be able to Yuanying for the rest of your life. It will be a waste of your talent. The young man bowed his head respectfully, Your Highness is right. I was too impetuous. Don't worry, there won't be a next time. This person was the rising star of the Tianqi sect, Song Qingyuan. He was once in the limelight at the Desolate Sea Conference. 3 years ago in the Battle of Xiling City, Tianqi sect's ice and fire elders and sect master Chao Wei were suppressed and captured by Lin Feng, while the northern militant court and the great Zhou dynasty took the opportunity to flatten the Tianqi sect's mountain gate, extinguishing the Tianqi sect's sacred flame that had been passed down for thousands of years. Most of the Tianqi sect's resources were annexed by the northern militant dynasty. After the Tianqi sect was destroyed, most of its disciples were absorbed by the great Zhou dynasty. Lin Feng did not have the mind to lower himself to the level of the Celestial Pool sect people who came to Xiling City with Chao Wei and the others. Song Qingyuan and the others scattered like birds and beasts, each looking for a way out. In the end Song Qingyuan still came to the great Zhou dynasty, and in the end he attached himself to the great Zhou crown prince Liang Yuan. This time, Liang Yuan didn't plan to bring Song Qingyuan to Kunlun Mountain. After thinking for a long time, Song Qingyuan gritted his teeth and fought for this opportunity. He was clearly aware of the matter of Dao Yuding joining the Celestial Sect of Wonders. He didn't have any special intentions in coming here this time. On the contrary, it was for the sake of tempering his mental state so that he could overcome the void lightning tribulation. Both he and Dao Yuding had excellent physiques, but their natures were the opposite. Dao Yuding had too much true yang in her innate yin while Song Qingyuan had too much true yin in his innate yang. Both of them had yin and yang bodies, but they were a bit worse than Yang Qing. They didn't have a perfect balance of yin and yang like Yang Qing. With such a physique, Song Qingyuan's cultivation of the Celestial Pool sect's Taoist magic, the Northern Flaming Sun mystic spell, which allowed him to improve his cultivation base quickly and cast powerful spells. However, it wasn't without its disadvantages. When he reached the late stage of the Golden Elixir and wanted to challenge the Void Lightning Tribulation and attempt to form his nascent soul, he would encounter problems. Song Qingyuan's yin and yang were not in perfect harmony. When he was going through the Thunder Tribulation, he might be able to break through the test of temperament, but it was very likely that his foundation would be unstable in the accumulation of dermic powers, and his yin and yang would be out of balance. Usually, it wouldn't be much of a problem. However, during the lightning tribulation, the slightest mistake could result in death. The heavenly lightning would strike them into charcoal. This was also the reason why Song Qingyuan had been stuck at the late stage of the Golden Elixir for a long time and hadn't formed his nascent soul. Originally, the Tianqi sect had prepared a solution for him, which was to marry Dao Yuding. Not only could the two of them complement each other's weaknesses, but they could also improve at the same time, further increasing their potentials. However, now that the Tianqi sect was gone, and Dao Yuding had joined Xianmen Tianzong, there was naturally no need to think about this aspect. From the moment Dao Yuding entered the sect, Song Qingyuan had treated her as his private property, and he didn't allow anyone to touch her. Now, he had to watch the cooked duck fly away. This made Song Qingyuan, who seemed modest but was actually very controlling, so depressed that his mentality was distorted. Then, Song Qingyuan was horrified to discover that his state of mind had been severely affected by this, giving birth to an inner demon. The Celestial Sect of Wonders and Dao Yuding had become the demonic thoughts in his heart. In the past 3 years, if he wanted to go through the Thunder Tribulation to form his nascent soul, it wasn't just a problem of his dermic powers. Even his state of mind had become demonic thoughts. If he triggered the Void Lightning Tribulation in this state, he would definitely die. Therefore, this time, Song Qingyuan followed the cultivators of the state of Zhou to Kunlun Mountain to cleanse his mind and calm his state of mind. After that, even if the foundation of his dermic powers was unstable, and his yin and yang were not in harmony, he could grit his teeth and overcome it. Although he wasn't completely confident, at least there was hope for him to form his nascent soul again. As for whether or not there was any other hope in the depths of his heart, only Song Qingyuan himself knew. Even though Song Qingyuan lives with his tail between his legs and is so low-key that he wants to dig a hole and bury himself, but Lin Feng has a clear grasp of any movement around Mount Yujing and Cloud Peak. For the current Lin Feng, Song Qingyuan was not worth mentioning at all, but as long as he paid a little attention, he would be able to discover this person's existence. Now is not the time for you to stir up trouble. Lin Feng smiled nonchalantly and ignored him. Compared to Song Qingyuan, there was another person who could attract his attention. The reincarnation sect's heavenly path cultivator, Tao Master Tian Tan, Shen Qifeng. Although Shen Qifeng's gaze was calm and his gaze swept across the people of Xianmen Tianzong on the drill ground, Lin Feng could still keenly feel that Shen Qifeng's attention lingered on Wang Lin for a little longer. Lin Feng looked at Shen Qifeng calmly and smiled leisurely. Interesting. Not far from Wang Lin stood a woman. Her body was straight like a javelin, the tip of her spear pointed to the sky, and her killing intent was oppressive. Her fiery red hair was spread out, fluttering in the air like a raging fire. Her red eyebrows were like thin swords, making her look valiant, lacking some of the gentleness of a woman, even though her facial features were extremely delicate. It was Lin Feng's fourth disciple, Yu Hongyan. Behind her were her disciples from Snow Wind Valley. They were all dressed in purple, and their lapels were embroidered with a Tai Chi pattern like the other flutes. Their cuffs were embroidered with a few strokes of white thread, and the pattern of a tornado was outlined with a few strokes. Yu Hongyan's disciples were not more female, and the number was slightly less than Xiao Yan's and Wang Lin's disciples. However, all of them were full of spirit and energy, and their appearance was quite good, just like Lin Feng's master. Next to Yu Hongyan stood a gentle and tranquil young man in purple. He was Lin Feng's fifth disciple, Yang Qing. However, compared to the senior brothers and sisters in front of him, Yang Qing's disciples were quite lonely. There was only one person standing alone, giving people a very lonely and shabby feeling. Behind him was a youth with a rather cold and stern expression between his brows. He wore a purple tight robe with a taiji pattern embroidered on the lapel. The cuffs were decorated with a golden and green semicircle that formed a complete circle. Although he was as delicate and handsome as Master Yang Qing, the temperament of the master and disciple was completely opposite. Yang Qing was like a spring breeze, but this young man was like a cold winter. He was Yang Qing's only personal disciple, Zhou Yunsong. He was a talent that Yang Qing and Zhu Yi met by chance when they traveled together in the past 3 years. So they brought him back to Kunlun Mountain, and after passing the test, he became a disciple of Xianmen Tianzong. After that, he passed the successor test and finally became a successor disciple of Yang Qing's Nirvana Wonderland. Without experiencing the previous 2 opening ceremonies, people from other forces were a little unfamiliar with Zhou Yunsong. Venerable Swordsman Flowing Light had personally witnessed the second opening ceremony of Xianmen Tianzong. After carefully looking at Zhou Yunsong, he turned to look at Ancestor Qing Wei, who had participated in the first opening ceremony of Xianmen Tianzong. After recalling for a while, Ancestor Qing Wei replied with certainty, he wasn't in the first opening ceremony either. He didn't enter the sect in the second opening ceremony. Venerable Swordsman Flowing Light nodded, he is also a talent. He glanced at Zhou Yunsong again and had a vague feeling in his heart, this guy seems to have some secrets, but Xianmen Tianzong's Taoism is quite unique, and I can only see some basic things. The so-called basic was to cultivate for about 10 years, and their realm was the same as Su Yunsheng, Ying Luozha, Lu Xiafeng, and Li Xingfei, they were all in the late stage of foundation establishment. Because of their cultivation, Venerable Swordsman Flowing Light and other primordial spirit big shots could detect some clues that others couldn't, but naturally, most people couldn't do it. Some cultivators looked at Yang Qing and Zhou Yunsong, and there was even a faint hint of mockery in their eyes. This mockery was not aimed at Zhou Yunsong. After all, he was also a genius who had cultivated to the late stage of foundation establishment in 10 years. This mockery was aimed at Yang Qing. At the moment, Yang Qing's cultivation was in the middle stage of golden elixir, the same as his martial nephew Dao Yuding. Excluding Li Yuanfang and Luo Qinggu who entered the sect in West Hill City 3 years ago, among the 6 disciples who first entered Lin Feng's sect, his cultivation was the lowest. Usually, Yang Qing was the most low-key, and he didn't have any outstanding achievements. Now, all the branches of Xianmen Tianzong had gathered, and his sect was the loneliest. Compared to Xiao Yan and the others who had many disciples, he only had one disciple who stared at him, which showed that he was the least attractive in the sect. Yang Qing didn't care much about it. With a smile on his lips, he stood there calmly, without the slightest embarrassment. Beside him stood Li Yuanfang and Luo Qingguo. The seats behind the two of them were empty because the two of them hadn't accepted disciples yet. However, this wasn't very eye-catching because everyone knew that Li Yuanfang and Luo Qingguo had only entered Lin Feng's sect after the Battle of West Hill City 3 years ago and became his personal disciples. Therefore, everyone was more concerned about the cultivation realm of the two of them. They haven't been cultivating for a long time, but they have already formed the golden elixir. A group of big shots secretly sighed in their hearts. To be able to be favored by the master of the celestial sect and be accepted as a personal disciple, they are indeed monstrous figures. In West Hill City, Li Yuanfang and Luo Qingguo had more or less shown some extraordinary talent. At this time, everyone could confirm that under Lin Feng's sect, their future was bright and could already be expected. The bright future was no longer a prediction, but it was actually right in front of them. In the camp of Beyond Heaven Mountain, everyone was curiously observing. Only one person lowered his head lightly, clenched his fists tightly, and his body was even trembling. He took a deep breath and stabilized his trembling body. Then, he raised his head again and looked at the charming Luo Qingguo on the large drill ground. Finally. At this moment, Chu Yang only felt a burst of blood rushing to his head, and he saw stars. At this moment, he almost fainted. Time seemed to have stopped. The surrounding people had all disappeared. The central hall was gone, the master of the celestial sect was gone, Xiao Yan, Zhu Yi, and the others were also gone. Between heaven and earth, there was only one figure left, causing him to use all the strength in his body to control himself from rushing over. Qingguo, I finally see you again. For a moment, Chu Yang even felt that his vision was a little blurry. Just as he raised his head, he quickly lowered it again, for fear that others would notice his abnormality. However, at this moment, the others didn't have the time to pay attention to Chu Yang's abnormality. At this moment, they were all puzzled. Today was such a big day, but out of the 8 personal disciples under Lin Feng, only 7 had actually arrived. Only Shi Tianhao was missing. At this moment, he still hadn't appeared, and his whereabouts were unknown. Chapter 664. Although Luo Qingguo was next to Li Yuanfang, a space was deliberately left between the two of them. This space was a little more outwards, and a group of true disciples of the celestial sects of the celestial sects of the celestial sects of the celestial sects stood there. Every single one of them had vigorous magic power, and their eyes were lively, showing that their cultivation base was not ordinary. They were also dressed in purple magic robes, and there was a Tai Chi pattern on their lapels. The symbol on their sleeves was very simple. It was a pure black circle with a black line on it, and it was hollow inside. This symbol meant that these disciples were true disciples of Shi Tianhao's barren sky valley. Every one of them had an extraordinary cultivation base, especially the girl who was the leader. She was beautiful and gentle, and the others faintly regarded her as the center of attention. However, the girl herself was a little reserved about her position. This girl, who was also in the late stage of foundation establishment, was Shi Tianhao's true disciple, Zhuge Wanqiu. There were also many disciples of Barren Sky Valley. As Shi Tianhao became famous in West Hill City, and at the same time, as he grew older, more and more disciples chose to join Barren Sky Valley. Now, the number of true disciples in Barren Sky Valley was no less than that of Yuhongyan's Snow Wind Valley, and there were many talents among them. However, the true disciples of Barren Sky Valley all looked embarrassed at the moment. It was such an important day for the sect, but their master was missing. Although their master had never been very reliable, it was especially infuriating this time. Not long ago, someone had sent a voice transmission back, claiming that he would definitely return before the ceremony. However, even now, when the opening ceremony was over and the sect competition was about to begin, he was still nowhere to be seen. Where is Master? A youth of only 11 or 12 years old whispered, "So many people are watching, it's so embarrassing." Zhuge Wanqiu turned to look at him, her beautiful eyebrows slightly knitted, and she said in a low voice, "Goldie, don't say such things." Goldie immediately pouted at Zhuge Wanqiu's words and did not dare to say anything more. However, his expression clearly showed that he was not convinced. Xiao Yan's disciples, Lu Xiaofeng and Yan Wuwei, who were closer to them, looked at each other and shook their heads helplessly, sighing. Although little Martial Uncle is a little, that, in front of so many outsiders, Goldie, aren't you a little too much? Yan Wuwei looked at Goldie and said rudely. Lu Xiaofeng gave him a sidelong glance. Everyone else can criticize Goldie like this, but you can't. As expected, Goldie wasn't afraid of Yan Wuwei at all. He made a face at him and said, "Senior brother Fatty, you should watch your big mouth first." Yan Wuwei glared at him angrily. "You brat." But as angry as he was, there was nothing Yan Wuwei could do to Goldie. The youth in front of him, who was more than 10 years younger than him, had the same cultivation level as Lu Xiaofeng and Zhuge Wanqiu, and was even stronger than his cultivation level in the middle stage of the foundation establishment realm. Goldie was very famous. His name was Huang Zhenting, and his experience was similar to that of Zhou Yunsong. He was a talent that Shi Tianhao picked up when he was traveling outside after the opening ceremony of West Hill City. At that time, Goldie was only a little boy who was 4 or 5 years old. Later, he passed the heart-reflecting staircase test and the true disciple test, and finally became a true disciple of Shi Tianhao's barren Sky Valley. His cultivation level also improved by leaps and bounds. However, following by Shi Tianhao's side, this kid was raised to be another little devil. But compared to Shi Tianhao, who was cute on the outside but actually evil on the inside, Goldie was still very simple. It was just that his temperament was more wild and straightforward. He was often sold by his master, but he still helped to count the money. Sometimes, when Goldie finally came to his senses, he would also stomp his feet in anger. However, he was a person who didn't learn from his mistakes. When he turned around, he would be heartless and silly, being tricked by his own master until his head was full of bumps. However, it might also be because of his pure and straightforward state of mind, combined with his outstanding talent in Taoism, that he was able to build a spiritual platform and condense a pill cauldron in a short period of less than 8 years. His speed surpassed most of the true disciples, and gradually, he became known in Xianmen Tianzong. Huang Zhenting was cheerful and optimistic. He was also very familiar with the true disciples of the other branches. Everyone also treated him as a younger brother who didn't understand anything, and laughed with him. If Master doesn't come back, I wonder if the founder will teach him a lesson. Goldie started to imagine some beautiful things, but just as the words left his mouth, a voice sounded in his mind, "Whether I will be taught a lesson or not, this is not certain, but a certain kid's days are not going to be good." Goldie was stunned. "Master." In the empty space in front of him and Zhuge Wanqiu, a crack suddenly appeared in the void, and a tall figure walked out from it. In the central hall, Lin Feng revealed a smile at the corner of his mouth, and the rest of the people's spirits were also lifted. They saw that in the middle of the great drill ground, there was an additional person in the position between Li Yuanfang and Luo Qingguo. It was a tall youth, about 17 or 18 years old. He had red lips and white teeth, and his eyes were like bright stars. He looked extraordinarily handsome, and his jet-black long hair draped over his shoulders. He was well-proportioned, tall, and handsome, but his entire body seemed to contain an extremely terrifying explosive power, sending chills down people's spines. Although he had a smile on his face and looked likable, when the people looked at him, they felt as if they were facing a giant beast from ancient times, who could turn the world upside down with a single move. Shi Xingyun stared at the tall youth, and after a while, he sighed, "He's finally grown up." Not only Shi Xingyun, but most of the people present also had mixed feelings, murmuring, He's grown up, and he's even more powerful." At this moment, there were still some traces of childhood between the youth's brows, so people could clearly identify him just by looking at his appearance. He was the youngest male disciple under Lin Feng, the leader of the Celestial Gate, Xianmen Tianzong's junior martial uncle, a young genius, and a natural-born supreme Shi Tianhao. As soon as he was born, he was already in the mid-stage of the foundation establishment realm and achieved the supreme spirit platform. He was plotted against by his brother, Shi Tianyi, and survived. He became Lin Feng's disciple and was reborn, becoming even more powerful than before. He won first place in the Golden Elixir period during the Wilderness Sea Assembly and officially announced his return as the king. In the Battle of Kunlun Mountain, he killed the mid-stage Yuanying Patriarch with his mid-stage Golden Elixir cultivation, and then in the fated duel in West Hill City, he killed another young genius, the dual-pupiled cultivator, Shi Tianyi, who was known as a natural-born god. He possessed 2 divine lights of creation, and was the youngest Yuanying cultivator in the recorded history of the human cultivation world in the Divine Land. He reached the nascent soul stage at the age of 13, which shocked the world. All of his achievements shocked the world, but what was even more shocking was his age. All of this was accomplished before he turned 13. It was as if he was constantly reminding others that they had lived thousands and hundreds of years in vain. As long as they thought about how Shi Tianhao would grow up in the future and how his cultivation level, divine sense, and dermic powers would improve further, even a primordial soul powerhouse would feel slightly dizzy. And now, the little thing of the past had become the Shi Tianhao of today. He had really grown up. Although he was still a young man, the childishness had completely disappeared from his face, and he was no different from an ordinary adult. Shi Tianhao first bowed to Lin Feng, who was in the central hall. "Master, I'm back." Lin Feng, who was in the hall, smiled. "You're late." He was naturally the one who had the most direct view of Shi Tianhao's changes. He had personally witnessed the little boy of the past grow into the tall young man that he was today. Even Lin Feng was emotional. Shi Tianhao smiled and said, "Master, don't be angry. I came back a little late this time because I was preparing for the upcoming sect competition. At least I didn't delay anything." He looked at Xiao Yan, Zhu Yi, and the others and smiled. "Senior brothers, don't blame me later. Junior nephews, get ready. Little Uncle Master has brought back something good for you." Shi Tianhao smiled at Su Yunsheng, Lu Xiaofeng, and the others, as well as his own disciples, Huang Zhenting, Zhuge Wanqiu, and the others. "You too, Master has prepared a surprise for you." Yan Mingyue looked at Shi Tianhao and carefully observed him for a moment. Suddenly, she raised her eyebrows. This devil incarnate actually came back with injuries? Lin Daohan nodded. Although his injuries have stabilized, his qi, blood, dermic powers, and spirit are all showing signs of decline. He was previously injured quite badly. The other Essence Soul experts also saw this and could not help but look at each other as their thoughts ran wild. The Shi Tianhao in front of them was the same as Xiao Yan, Zhu Yi, and Wang Lin. They were all mid-stage Yuanying. Combined with his achievements during the Golden Elixir period, it was possible that even if he was injured now, he would at least be a Essence Soul expert. In the Yuanying stage, Shi Tianhao almost had no opponents apart from his own disciples. Even if there were, they were extremely rare and could be counted on one hand. He also had the Dharma treasure Kunpeng Palace given by Lin Feng to protect him. Even if he could not defeat an Essence Soul expert, he was more than half confident that he could escape unscathed. Xiao Yan and the others also looked at Shi Tianhao. Shi Tianhao smiled. "I went to the vast land of infinite wilderness and found a Tao Wu. I fought with it. I didn't win, but I didn't lose either. That Tao Wu injured me, and even the Kunpeng Palace was slightly damaged." In the central hall, all the cultivators below the Essence Soul level gasped. The Tao Wu was one of the 4 ferocious beasts in the primordial era. It looked like a tiger, had long fur, a human face, tiger feet, pig teeth, and a long tail. It was ferocious, stubborn, and brutal. Although Shi Tianhao did not say what the Tao Wu's cultivation level was, it was undoubtedly a Tao Wu that had attained the immortal demon soul and the Kunpeng Palace. It was able to injure Shi Tianhao and even hurt his Essence Soul Dharma treasure Kunpeng Palace. "I didn't let it off easy." I cut off a piece of its flesh and brought it back. After saying that, Shi Tianhao raised his hand, and a huge piece of flesh the size of a hill appeared in his palm. It was fixed by his Dharma power. Green blood kept rolling on the piece of flesh, but it could not stay. Countless divine light and runes spread on the green flesh like clouds, and a violent wave of demonic power shook the void. The piece of flesh did not wither or die. Instead, Shi Tianhao preserved its vitality and brought it back, maximizing its value. Even the group of Essence Soul experts could not help but twitch their mouths. After the naughty kid grew up, he became even more ferocious. He even dared to provoke the Tao Wu, a great sage, and even cut off its flesh and brought it back. At this time, in the central hall, Lin Feng's Dharma power projection stood up and said, "My disciple is late. Sorry for embarrassing myself. Now, I announce that the internal sect competition of Xianmen Tianzong has officially begun." Chapter 665. Our sect's internal sect grand competition has officially begun. Lin Feng's Dharma power projection stood up and turned into a beam of white light. It was like a heavenly pillar that connected to Yujing Mountain above the clouds. It was like a path to heaven, unfolding in front of everyone. Emperor Qin Shiyu, Lin Daohan, Liang Yuan, Zhu Hongguo, and the others were the first to stand up. Dao Master Thundercloud, Bei Rong First Chanyu, Hu Xiu, Sword Master Emerald Wave, and the others also stood up. The group of primordial soul experts directly walked towards the white light path and climbed up Yujing Mountain. The cultivators under their command also followed closely behind and climbed up Yujing Mountain together. Behind them were the small and medium-sized forces such as Beyond Heaven Mountain and the Scarlet Clouds sect. They could all go up and watch the ceremony together. After the guests left, the group of foundation disciples of Xianmen Tianzong entered the central hall under the guidance of the outer sect steward. There was a light and shadow illusion in the middle of the hall. Next, they would be shown the contents of the sect grand competition and the Dharma communication conference. Although many of the foundation disciples were still new, they abided by the rules and sat down in order under the arrangement of the outer sect steward. In the middle of the crowd on the drill ground, in front of Xiao Yan, Zhu Yi, Shi Tianhao, and the others, a beam of light rose from the center of the Tai Chi diagram, reaching straight to Yujing Mountain in the sky. Xiao Yan and the others took the lead and walked into the beam of light. Behind them, the group of Xianmen Tianzong true disciples followed their respective masters and entered in a line. When the group of guests climbed up Yujing Mountain, the white light in front of them dissipated. They had already reached the open area at the top of the mountain. The huge Xiantian treasure tree stood at the top of the mountain. Under the shade of the tree, the All-Heaven Hall was the most eye-catching building. Not far from the All-Heaven Hall, there was the Heaven-Returning Gold Pavilion, which was used for alchemy, the Universe Hall, which was used for disciples' cultivation, the Divine Craft Hall, which was used for refining weapons, and the Scripture Tower, which was used for storing ancient books and documents. The location of the buildings seemed messy, but there was a hidden pattern to them. Other than that, there were two huge buildings. One of them had the words, Law Enforcement Hall, written on it. It was a new building that had been built in the past 3 years. It was responsible for the discipline and law enforcement of the sect. It was run by the sixth martial uncle, Li Yuanfang, whose name made the younger generation of Xianmen Tianzong turn pale. He was impartial. The other building was even larger. Its size and height were second only to the All Heaven's Great Hall. On the horizontal board above the main entrance, the words, Spreading Law Hall, were written. This was the place where the true disciples of Xianmen Tianzong usually practiced their techniques. It was specially used for sparring and exchanging pointers. At the same time, the Spreading Law Hall was also the venue for the grand competition and the Dharma exchange. All of the battles would be held here. The door of the Spreading Law Hall opened, and the guests entered together. They saw that the hall was divided into 2 floors, and there were many runes floating in the air. Xiao Yan, Zhu Yi, and the others also entered the Spreading Law Hall. Xiao Yan turned to Shi Tianhao and said, Today we mainly use the fighting arena. For our internal competition, the teaching arena is still open. For the Dharma exchange with other people, we only use the fighting arena, not the teaching arena. Shi Tianhao nodded. I understand. He pinched his hands together and softly shouted, up. The upper floor of the two-story building shone brightly, while the lower floor's light was slightly dimmer. Lin Daohan, Shi Yu, and the others looked as usual, but their eyes were carefully looking at the spreading law hall where everyone was. Dao Master Changle's expression slightly changed. The space above contains many Dharma inhibition. It feels a bit similar to the Hidden Dragon Pot. The Hidden Dragon Pot was a magic weapon owned by the royal family of the Qin dynasty. Currently, it was refined and controlled by King Anliang, Shi Zongyue. There was a universe inside, and it opened up an independent cave. It was a mysterious mini-kiliocosm. The Hidden Dragon Pot had many uses, and it was a sharp and murderous magic treasure. However, it also had a great advantage, and that was that under the arrangement of the user, if someone was fighting inside the pot and received a fatal blow, the Hidden Dragon Pot would automatically activate a magic power restriction to block the fatal blow for the person who was injured. Therefore, when the Qin dynasty held the Baron Si Dharma Assembly, they used the Hidden Dragon Pot as the fighting arena. It was convenient for the descendants of the various forces to enter and fight with all their strength. Normally, the Hidden Dragon Pot Grotto Heaven was also a place for the disciples of the great Qin dynasty to spar. Fighting on the edge of life and death to gain experience, the rewards were far greater than normal competitions with scruples. Dao Master Changle now clearly felt that the upper space of the Hongfa Hall in Xianmen Tianzong also had the same function. Slowly, Emperor Stonefeather said, not only that, this hall is not a magic weapon like the Hidden Dragon Pot. It does not have the Hidden Dragon Pot's ability to catalyze the growth of all things or to trap and kill the enemy, but it has a few other functions. He glanced at the upper space of the Hongfa Hall and said, if I am not wrong, this space can freely simulate all kinds of natural environments. Not only ordinary natural environments, but also some dangerous and special environments. It is not a simple illusion, but a real creation out of the void. It is almost like moving a part of the real space here. The group of primordial spirit experts nodded secretly. In this way, the training of the disciples of the Hongfa Hall was more efficient and comprehensive. In many places, one could enjoy the dangerous scenery without leaving home. Or, before the disciples went to a certain place, they could also familiarize themselves with the environment here in advance. When they really went there, they would naturally have more confidence. This upper space should be the so-called fighting arena, right? Yan Mingyue gently tucked her hair behind her ear and looked down at the lower space of the Hongfa Hall. So, this is the fighting arena. I wonder what mysteries it has. Beside her, Lin Daohan and many other people were also looking at the lower space of the Hongfa Hall. Lin Feng smiled and did not say anything. Shi Tianhao smiled and said, Goddess Yan and elders, don't be anxious. You will naturally find out in a moment. He clapped his hands and in the two spaces of the Hongfa Hall, many small light doors appeared. All primordial spirit experts can go to the Hall of All Heavens. Other people, there is a space inside the light door. It is convenient for you to rest and watch our sex competition. All the guests immediately nodded. The Yuanying ancestors entered the light doors. The light doors formed a ring, and there was no hierarchy. Each family could choose at will, and their disciples followed closely behind. Chu Yang followed Wu Yunliang, Meng Chao ran, and other elders into the light door. He saw that there was indeed a space inside. It was like an elegant room in the secular world. The furnishings were not luxurious, but it was simple and elegant, making people feel comfortable. In the space inside the elegant room, there was a huge light illusion in midair. It showed everything inside the Hongfa Hall to the people in the elegant room. It was convenient for everyone to watch the competition and the ceremony. Xiao Yan and the others, as well as the group of direct disciples of the celestial sect of Xian under them, are currently quietly standing in the lower level of the Great Law Hall. Chu Yang looked deeply at Luo Qinggu for the last time, as if he wanted to engrave her image in his mind. After that, he forced himself to close his eyes and calm his mind. Qinggu is living very well now. I will meet her one day. To be able to see her again, this moment is already enough. Chu Yang let out a long breath and opened his eyes again. This time, his gaze was calm and clear. He carefully looked at the Hongfa Hall in front of him and began to ponder. Next, it should be the internal competition of Xianmen Tianzong to decide the most outstanding disciples. Then, this group of people will represent Xianmen Tianzong to exchange pointers with the descendants of other forces. Chu Yang pondered, in these years, not only the master of the Xianmen Tianzong, but also the disciples under him are all extremely talented. They have almost swept away all the young experts of the same generation. This has laid the foundation for Xianmen Tianzong's prestige today. But, can the second-generation disciples of Xianmen Tianzong inherit the glorious achievements of their predecessors? Chu Yang's gaze moved. Right now, Xianmen Tianzong is in the same camp as the Qin dynasty, the Zhou dynasty, the Northern Militant Imperial Court, the Purple Cloud Dao, and other forces. They are fighting against Taishu Temple. The confrontation between the two sides has almost influenced the future situation of the Divine Land. Ever since the Mount Shu sword sect was defeated in Western Tomb City, they have been keeping a low profile for the past 3 years. However, if someone doesn't take Mount Shu sect seriously, they will suffer a great loss. Chu Yang lowered his eyelids. There will definitely be a battle between the Mount Shu sword sect and the celestial sect of Xianmen. If our Beyond Heaven Mountain wants to survive, we must plan properly. Eldest martial uncle and master have made the right choice. However, if we want to survive in the hearts of the two great forces, we still need to put in more effort. Chu Yang's fists gradually clenched. I need to work even harder. Time is still pressing. It was not only Chu Yang. The cultivators of the other forces were also silently observing the Hongfa Hall and the people of Xianmen Tianzong in the lower space. Marquis Jing Huanho entered an elegant room by himself, not with Liang Yuan. He leisurely reclined in his seat, his gaze sweeping past Yu Hongyan, Luo Qinggu, Dao Yuding, Li Xingfei, and Zhuge Wanqiu one by one. His expression seemed to be one that was not a smile as his fingers lightly tapped on the table beside him. Behind Marquis Jing Huanho stood a white-clothed middle-aged man with late Yuanying cultivation. He was one of Marquis Jing Huanho's followers. Behind the white-clothed middle-aged man was another group of cultivators with imposing auras. Each of them exuded a strong killing intent, causing the people in the elegant room to feel like they were standing on a battlefield filled with mountains of corpses and seas of blood. Among them, there were 2 people who stood in the crowd and seemed a bit out of place. However, their minds and willpower were steady. Even in this kind of environment that could suffocate ordinary people, their expressions were still calm. The 2 of them watched the group of Xianmen Tianzong direct disciples in the lower space of the Hongfa Hall and continuously communicated with each other using magic power. Which one will it be? We can't tell right now. We'll see after we fight. Focus on the disciple under Shao Yan in Fentianya. With that person's physique, he is most likely to become Shao Yan's disciple and learn the Tao. The guests in the various elegant rooms kept thinking. In the Hongfa Hall, Shao Yan and the others looked at each other and smiled. They said to their respective disciples, "The rest is up to you." Everyone nodded. At this time, Shi Tianhao smiled and said, "If you think it will be the same as the previous small competition, then you are gravely mistaken." As he spoke, he lightly clapped his hands. The swan knees flesh that he brought back appeared in the space. The blue flesh constantly wriggled, and then many fierce monsters and monsters were suddenly born from the swan knees blood essence. Shi Tianhao said, "These things are monsters born from the evil energy of the swan knees blood essence. They are called dark yang beasts. They are like the little insects on the swan knees body. Their strength is basically between our human cultivators' foundation establishment and golden elixir period. There are some fluctuations, but the difference is not large." Chapter 666. The appearance of the roaring yang beast was somewhat similar to that of Bai Hen. It also had the face of a human and the body of a tiger. It looked ferocious, and its size was similar to that of a leopard. It was agile and ferocious, and its entire body was covered in green fur that actually flashed with a faint metallic luster. The group of true disciples of the celestial sect of wonders were all carefully observing this kind of demonic beast. Shi Tianhao introduced, among the 4 primordial beasts, the Swan-Ni is the most stubborn. Its innate ability is demonic aura. At the same time, it has an unyielding offensive ability, as well as an indestructible and stubborn defense. Even the strength of its body is second to none among the 4 ancient beasts. The roaring young beast is formed from Bai An's evil aura, so the nature of its essence is the same as Bai An's. You all need to be careful. Shi Tianhao said it lightly, but the group of true disciples paid attention. At the same time, their gazes toward Shi Tianhao became more respectful and admiring. Among the 4 ancient beasts, Bai An's body was the strongest, and it was a great saint of the demon race. But even so, Shi Tianhao forcibly cut off its flesh and brought it back. Although Shi Tianhao also paid a price, he was still a middle-stage Yuanying cultivator after all. The other spectators looked at Shi Tianhao and also shook their heads in admiration. Shi Tianhao's direct disciple, Huang Zhenting, raised his voice and asked, "Master, do you want us to hunt these roaring young beasts and see who can kill more?" "Of course not." Shi Tianhao smiled, "You will still be divided into groups of 2, and you will randomly draw lots to determine your opponents. After that, you will compete. However, this time, the environment of your competition will be filled with these roaring young beasts. During the competition, not only will you have to defeat your opponents, you will also have to kill at least 3 roaring young beasts." Shi Tianhao said, "Moreover, this time, the environment of the arena of the Spreading Law Hall is the habitat of the Bai An tribe. In this environment, the battle strength of the roaring young beasts will increase. You will have to face the attacks of the roaring young beasts while defeating your opponents in a completely unfamiliar environment." In each of the private rooms, the young talents of the other sects all frowned slightly or heavily. Xianmen Tianzong's assessment was not simple. Compared to ordinary arenas, the environment was much more dangerous, so the difficulty was greatly increased. While facing the opponent he had to defeat, he still had to be on guard against the attacks of the surrounding roaring young beasts. Just like what Shi Tianhao had said, these roaring young beasts' battle prowess surpassed the vast majority of human Foundation establishment cultivators. They were close to the level of cultivators in the Golden Elixir period. Although they looked ferocious, it was obvious that they were quite intelligent. Everyone present, whether it was the descendant of Xianmen Tianzong or the young elites of the major forces, were all geniuses who could look down on their peers. This kind of monsters and fierce beasts could be dealt with by 1 or 2, but if they came in groups, it would be very tricky and even dangerous. Defeating the opponent was not considered a victory. One had to kill at least 3 of these beasts before it could be considered over. The arena was not an ordinary arena, but a completely unfamiliar environment, which was more conducive for the roaring young beasts. This further restricted the cultivators' battle prowess, because no one knew if there would be any unexpected situations. Although the difficulty was increased, the more dangerous the environment was, the more it could train the young disciples' strength. At the same time, it could also test their true strength and unearth their potential. After all, cultivators spent their entire lives fighting with others or going out to gain experience. It was rare for them to fight with others on a fixed and flat arena. Most of the time, they had to face unfamiliar environments, unfamiliar opponents, as well as other enemies glaring at them covetously from the side. There were also all sorts of sudden changes. At this time, Shi Tianhao continued, "For the sake of fairness, the participating disciples are not allowed to use talismans, magic tools, or other external objects. They will use their own magic power to exchange pointers." At this point, Shi Tianhao suddenly smiled again. "Oh right, let me explain in advance. In the first round of competition, the winner must kill at least 3 roaring young beasts, and the total number of roaring young beasts in the arena will be 10. After entering the second round, the winner of the competition must kill at least 4 roaring young beasts while defeating the opponent, and the total number of roaring young beasts in the arena will be 15. After entering the third round, the winner must kill at least a headless roaring young beast, and the total number of roaring young beasts in the arena will be 20. This will be the rule, and so on. Shi Tianhao finally added, the size of the space in the arena will never change. In other words, the further one went, the more roaring young beasts there would be in the same size area, and the number of beasts required to be killed would also be higher. 3 months ago, there was a small competition in each cave abode. At that time, it was announced that one of the rewards for the winner of the competition would be to become a seated contestant in this clan competition, and directly advance to the top 16. Shi Tianhao swept his gaze across the crowd. The winners of each cave abode, step forward now. Under Fen Tianya, Lu Xiafeng stepped forward. Beside him, Su Yunxing from Qian Tian Palace stepped forward. On Fan Lin Residence's side, it was Li Xingfei. During the internal competition 3 months ago, Dao Yuding was in seclusion to prepare for the Yin Fire Tribulation, and did not participate at all. The remaining 3 families, in order, were Zhao Huan, Zhou Yunsong, and Zhuge Wanqiu. Shi Tianhao looked at them and nodded, the 6 of you will each take a place in the top 16. The rest will compete for the remaining 10 places. The group of direct disciples nodded, and no one raised any objections. As early as half a year ago, the basic rules of this internal competition had already been announced. Everyone knew about the rewards for winning the internal competition 3 months ago. Furthermore, for the first place, it was a battle between dragons and tigers. If one's skills were not as good as others, there was nothing to complain about. However, at that time, no one would have thought that this clan competition would actually be held at the same time as the third opening ceremony. No one would have thought that there would be experts from other forces bringing their young talents to watch the ceremony. However, at this moment, the disciples of Xianmen Tianzong were in high spirits. Under the attention of the world, their fighting spirit was even higher. Although the qualifications for the top 16 had been reduced by 6, there was nothing for the crowd to complain about. After all, these 6 people were all well-known experts among the direct disciples of the sect. Even if they fought from the first round, they would most likely be able to advance to the top 16. The probability of an upset was relatively low, unless the 2 hot favorites met in advance. If one had to find a flaw, it would undoubtedly be Zhou Yunsong, who came from Nirvana Cave. He was the only disciple under Yang Qing, and in the branch internal competition 3 months ago, there was no way to talk about it. He was both the first and the last place. However, Yang Qing had a good reputation in the entire sect. He was in charge of the medicinal valley, had a gentle personality, and was kind to others. There were direct disciples who came to the medicinal valley, and they had all received his care and guidance. Therefore, when Zhou Yunsong was also listed as a seated contestant, no one said anything. However, there was one person who made the other direct disciples look at each other. Dao Yuding. Shi Tianhao looked at the group of direct disciples. Slowly, he said, all of you are in the foundation building realm. Although there is a difference in realms, it is also the result of your usual cultivation. Only Martial Niece Yuding is in the middle stage of the Golden Elixir realm. The situation is special, so we will suppress Martial Niece Yuding's cultivation to the late stage of the foundation building realm. Then, we will draw lots and exchange pointers with you. Dao Yuding nodded and did not say anything. Her expression was as usual. Obviously, she was already aware of this. The other direct disciples looked at each other and did not have any objections. If they did not do this, Dao Yuding would also directly occupy a place in the top 16. Now, at least they had the chance to exchange blows with Dao Yuding, although most of them did not think they could win. Under the situation where the quality of the Dao and the quality of the individual's cultivation were not too different, even if the cultivation of the Golden Elixir period's mana was suppressed to the foundation building realm, the strength of the cultivators would still be stronger than the majority of the foundation building realm cultivators. After the core formation realm, the knowledge and vision of the Dao would be completely different. Lu Xiafeng, Su Yunsheng, Li Xingfei, Zhao Huan, Zhou Yunsong, and Zhuge Wanqiu, the 6 of them, entered a door of light. Shao Yan, Yang Qing, and the others left the Hall of Spreading Law together and came to the Hall of All Heavens. Lin Feng and the big shots of the various forces were all here. Shi Tianhao presided over the Hall of Spreading Law while he stayed outside. He said to the group of direct disciples, "All of you return to the quiet room to rest. Those whose names are called will enter the room to compete." Everyone obeyed and entered a few doors of light. Meanwhile, Shi Tianhao clasped his palms together. The scene in the upper space of the Hall of Spreading Law suddenly changed. Under the gloomy sky, volcanoes erupted continuously, lava flowed out, and the wind howled. The entire space was covered by a layer of misty green light, carrying a dense and fierce aura. This was the paradise of the Bai and clan. Shi Tianhao pointed his finger, the space slightly trembled, and in an instant, it turned into dozens of identical small worlds. Because there were many direct disciples, especially in the first and second round, Shi Tianhao divided more places for the competition. Then, he placed 10 Bai and Yang beasts into each of the small worlds. When these Bai and Yang beasts came into contact with the green light that was everywhere in the small worlds, they suddenly let out a deafening roar. Their expressions were extremely joyful, as if they were fish in water. Their strength was further enhanced, and even their bodies were slightly bigger. Let the drawing of lots begin. Shi Tianhao lightly clapped his hands, and a huge ball of light appeared in front of him. There were many words appearing in the ball of light, and they were all names belonging to Xianmen Tianzong's direct disciples. After a round of drawing lots, dozens of people's names flew out of the light ball, and then they formed groups of 2, corresponding to each other, and floated in the air. The people whose names were drawn walked out of the quiet room through the door of light, and entered the competition grounds according to Shi Tianhao's instructions. Everyone else was calm and orderly, except for one person who was in a hurry. It was Shi Tianhao's disciple, Huang Zhenting. He pulled and dragged another direct disciple who had a bitter smile on his face, and was the first to rush into the competition grounds. When Huang Zhenting arrived at the competition grounds, he looked around and smiled, "I like this environment, I can't wait any longer." Before he finished speaking, a strange change occurred. The Bai and Yang beasts in the competition grounds all stared at him with ominous glints in their eyes, and unexpectedly all of them pounced towards him. As for Huang Zhenting's opponent, he stood to the side in a daze. The group of Bai and Yang beasts actually ignored him completely. Everyone was stunned. The other direct disciples who had not entered the competition grounds in time also stopped in their tracks, looking at the strange scene before them in astonishment. Only Shi Tianhao's expression remained the same. He coughed softly and said, "Ahem, ahem, there is something very important that I forgot to mention earlier. All disciples of my heaven desolate valley, take note. Because I fought with the Bai and at the source of these Bai and Yang beasts, they are especially sensitive to the magic energy of my heaven desolate valley." Chapter 667. These roaring young beasts are formed from the evil aura of the swan knee's flesh. Shi Tianhao's expression did not change. With a smile, he said confidently, "The swan knee's flesh was suppressed by me, but it did not completely lose its vitality and spirituality. Therefore, it is extremely hostile towards me. Therefore, these roaring young beasts are naturally very hostile towards me. They are very sensitive to the magic power fluctuations of my lineage." At this moment, although Shi Tianhao was still a young man, his tone was gentle as he earnestly instructed the group of true inheritors, "All disciples of my desolate heaven valley, take note. After entering the arena, the roaring young beasts will prioritize attacking you. Everyone, remember to be careful." All the heaven desolate valley disciples gulped and subconsciously swallowed as they looked at Huang Zhenting, who was surrounded by dozens of roaring young beasts. The disciples of the other branches all turned their heads to the other side, unable to bear to watch. "Our little martial uncle is too evil." In the all-heaven Great Hall, Xiao Yan and the others sat separately, but their actions were exactly the same. They all lowered their heads and looked at the tips of their feet as if they could see a flower on their shoes. Who would believe that the devil incarnate had forgotten to say that this brat was doing this on purpose? Poor Xiao Huang, he was once again cheated by his own master. This wasn't the first time he had slandered Shi Tianhao behind his back, and was retaliated against. Poor little Huang Zhenting was a person who didn't learn his lesson. No matter how many times he was taught a lesson, he would still do the same thing the next time. However, the disciples all glanced at Lin Feng, who was sitting on the main seat. They saw that Lin Feng's expression was normal as he calmly looked at the scene in the light. 3 yuan ying and 4 golden elixir. The 7 disciples immediately shivered. Xiao Yan felt this the most. He felt bitterness in his mouth. Little junior brother, you are becoming more and more like master. The group of nascent divinity realm experts could not help but smile. Venerable flowing light, venerable eternal joy, venerable sunlight, and the other essence soul experts who had participated in the Desolate Sea assembly looked at each other and shook their heads in laughter. The brat had indeed grown up, but he was even more bratty than before. In the private room of the great Qin dynasty, Shi Xingyun did not know whether to laugh or cry. He was speechless and only sighed after a while. Tianhao's personality, sigh. Sitting next to her was a young girl who looked no older than 11 or 12 years old, but she had already reached the foundation establishment stage. She was beautiful, and at this time, she wrinkled her little nose. Royal sister, isn't this big brother Shi Tianhao a little too unreliable? Shi Xingyun smiled and said, Jingyun, don't just look at the surface. Sitting next to her was her youngest sister, the youngest daughter of the great Qin Emperor Shi Yu, Shi Jingyun. Although she was young, she was already a rising star in the royal family of the great Qin dynasty. The expectations of the royal family of the great Qin dynasty were no less than Shi Chongyun and Shi Xingyun. Shi Jingyun snorted softly, I know that he is very powerful. I saw his battle with Shi Tianyi. However, his powerful skills and abilities cannot hide his unreliable nature. He is also a master. Which master would harm his disciple like this? The situation is too dangerous for him to be surrounded by 10 roaring young beasts that are comparable to the peak of the foundation building stage. Even if he could handle it, he would not be able to handle it now that he is completely unprepared and caught unprepared. Shi Xingyun smiled and shook her head, that's why you shouldn't just look at the surface. Take a closer look and see if it is really that dangerous. That's right. This space is similar to the hidden dragon kettle. There is no danger to his life, but injuries are unavoidable. As Shi Jingyun spoke, she looked at the arena carefully. However, that young man must have magical weapons and talismans to protect himself. Although the rules say that he is not allowed to use them, if he is really in danger. As she spoke, the young girl's eyes suddenly widened. Ha! In the arena, a young man shouted and punched a dark young beast that was pouncing at him, sending it flying. Following that, he leaped up agilely and disappeared from his original spot, nimbly dodging the attacks of 2 roaring young beasts on his left and right. A majestic wave of yang qi exploded from his small body. With his powerful physical strength, he swung his arm and used his palm like a blade, slashing at the waist of a roaring young beast. The roaring young beast's body flashed with a green metallic glow, blocking the attack. However, the green glow shook like water and was on the verge of shattering. This kind of ferocious beast was formed from the evil energy of the roaring yang's flesh. The nature of its energy was similar to the roaring yang's demonic energy. When it attacked, it was like maggots attached to the bone. When it defended, it was extremely tough and hard to break. However, with a single slash from Huang Zhenting, it was almost destroyed. Although Huang Zhenting was immature and impulsive, he was very intelligent in battle, advancing and retreating. When his slash did not completely break through the roaring young beast's defense, he stopped fighting. Wind blew under his feet, and he quickly dodged the attack of another roaring young beast. He kept himself moving, not falling into the encirclement of the roaring young beasts. Gales and lightning flashed all over Huang Zhenting's body, making it seem like he had turned into a bolt of lightning. Even under the encirclement of 10 roaring young beasts, he was still able to move with ease. As time passed, it was the roaring young beasts that were slowly losing ground. More and more roaring young beasts were injured. Every time Huang Zhenting attacked, he was not greedy. He did not ask for the result, and he would immediately leave. The roaring young beasts were not heavily injured, but under Huang Zhenting's guerrilla attacks, some of the roaring young beasts started to get injured, and they were forced to fall behind. On the other hand, Huang Zhenting became even more spirited. The more he fought, the more energetic he became. A relaxed smile even appeared on his face, and his attacks became sharper. He started to attack the heavily injured roaring young beasts. Shi Jingyun's eyes lit up. Oh, this kid, I didn't expect him to have some tricks up his sleeve. Tianhao is wild, but he knows his limits. He has full understanding and confidence in his disciple, Shi Xingyun said, plus, his actions can be used to train this kid. However, Huang Zhenting's original opponent was feeling helpless. The disciple who was in the same group as Huang Zhenting was a disciple under Zhu Yi of the Qian Tian Palace. His name was Yang Tai. Yang Tai was speechless as he watched Huang Zhenting and the roaring young beasts having fun. He, the main character, had become a bystander. At that moment, Shi Tianhao's voice sounded as if he was purposely luring the disciples to make mistakes. All disciples, be careful. If you are surrounded by the roaring young beasts and are unable to escape, you must be especially careful. Your opponent might take the opportunity to attack you together with the roaring young beasts. It is easy to lose if you are under pressure from two sides at the same time. However, do not think it is unfair, it is allowed by the rules. When you leave the sect and travel outside, you may encounter all kinds of enemies and dangers. In the Spreading Law Hall, you will be protected by the restrictive spell. However, once you are outside, you can only rely on yourself. There was nothing wrong with this lesson. Moreover, it was a very useful experience, which was very valuable to the group of true disciples. However, when he said it at this time and place, it seemed like he was instigating Yang Tai to attack Huang Zhenting together with the roaring young beasts. Shi Jingyun turned to look at Shi Xingyun with a puzzled expression. Shi Xingyun placed her hand on her forehead. She was starting to doubt her previous judgment of Shi Tianhao. Hearing Shi Tianhao's words, Yang Tai was tongue-tied. He turned his head to look at Huang Zhenting who was fighting with the Dark Sun Beast and bitterly smiled. He shook his head and said, not to mention my fellow disciples, even if it was an outsider, I wouldn't be able to do it if he wasn't a vicious person. He looked at Goldie, who had just knocked over a roaring young beast, and sighed, I am not a pedantic disciple, but Goldie's cultivation is indeed higher than mine. I am ashamed of my inferiority. This match is my loss. When the results of this match were announced, most people already knew what was going on. Although Goldie was young, he was only at the late stage of the foundation establishment realm. His opponent, Yang Tai, was also young, but he had just opened his Sea of Qi. Against Huang Zhenting, there was almost no chance for him to win. However, the situation in front of him was unexpected. All the roaring young beasts were attacking Huang Zhenting at the same time, which gave him a chance. However, Yang Tai gave up on this opportunity. His actions were seen by the spectators. Apart from a small number of people who secretly curled their lips and felt that Yang Tai was being pedantic, the majority of the spectators nodded their heads in approval. Xianmen Tianzong's style is quite righteous. The spectators praised in their hearts. On one hand, they were observing the cultivation of the true disciples of Xianmen Tianzong, and on the other hand, they were observing the true disciples' temperament and willpower. Most of the time, the smaller the details, the more real things could be seen. Although Yang Tai's cultivation was not high, he was a righteous person. He was open and aboveboard, and he was quite carefree. Some people might be unwilling and thirsty for victory, and they might feel that it was a pity that they were eliminated in the first round. However, although Yang Tai felt that it was a pity, it was more of a pity that his skills were not as good as Huang Zhenting's. However, he was not dispirited. He continued to work hard and strive to improve. This made the spectators nod their heads, especially those with higher cultivation. They could see that although Yang Tai was older than Huang Zhenting, his cultivation time was not as long as Huang Zhenting. Although his cultivation was low now, it did not mean that he would not have any achievements in the future. With such temperament and willpower, growing in an environment like Xianmen Tianzong, his future might not be bad. Inside the All Heavens Great Hall, Xiao Yan turned to look at Zhu Yi and said with a smile, "Second junior brother, this child is indeed a good seedling. He did not disappoint your expectations." Similar to Zhou Yunsong and Huang Zhenting, Yang Tai was also a disciple that Zhu Yi inadvertently took in when he was traveling outside. In terms of the boundless world, Yang Tai had entered the sect for less than a year. Wang Lin and the others also congratulated Zhu Yi with a smile. Zhu Yi also revealed a smile. Tai is a straightforward person with a firm will. Although his cultivation is slightly low now because he entered the sect too late, I am optimistic about his future. Lin Feng, who was sitting on the main seat, smiled and thought to himself, "Isn't that right?" His gaze fell on Yang Tai, then on Huang Zhenting and the others, and finally stopped on Zhou Yunsong. He smiled and thought to himself, "This is the future of my sect." Chapter 668. Inside the spreading law hall, Shi Tianhao looked at Yang Tai and then at Huang Zhenting. He revealed a gratified and regretful expression as he nodded. Since Tai admitted defeat willingly, little Huang only needs to kill 3 roaring young beasts to win. Yang Tai nodded his head, and under Shi Tianhao's channeling of mana, he exited the competition grounds. On the other hand, Huang Zhenting had quickly completed his goal of killing 3 raging young beasts. A look of longing appeared on his face as he looked at the remaining 7 raging young beasts inside. "I still want to play a little longer." His master, Shi Tianhao, chuckled. "You can slowly play for the next few rounds." Huang Zhenting did not say anything, but the other Heaven Desolate Valley disciples had bitter expressions. Not to mention the stone roaring young beasts in the first round, there would be more and more roaring young beasts in the later rounds. Based on the current situation, even if there were 10 or 20 roaring young beasts, they would most likely surround and attack the Heaven Desolate Valley true inheritors, regardless of who their opponents were. In a situation where there were more than one opponent, the difficulty would increase significantly with each additional opponent. The people from the other caves looked at each other. Those who drew Heaven Desolate Valley disciples as their opponents were extremely conflicted. If they could, they would rather fight against Lu Xiafeng, Su Yunsheng, and the other 6 seeded participants. At the very least, they would be able to show off their strengths. However, if they drew a Heaven Desolate Valley true inheritor, even if they won, it would be an unfair victory. This was because all the roaring young beasts in the arena would charge at the Heaven Desolate Valley disciples. Huang Zhenting's cultivation was publicly acknowledged. Although he entered the sect late, he was recognized as the second strongest Heaven Desolate Valley true inheritor, second only to Zhuge Wanqiu. Under normal circumstances, Yang Tai did not have much hope of winning against Huang Zhenting. Thus, it was normal for him to admit defeat, which made him seem upright. However, if the other cave abode disciples were stronger than their opponents from the desolate Heaven Valley to begin with, or if they were in a stalemate, it would be too much of a pain in the ass. If they were to gang up on the roaring young beasts, it would be an unfair victory. If they just watched from the sidelines, they would be suspected of using the roaring young beasts to exhaust their opponent's strength. If they took the initiative to admit defeat, it would be even more useless. In the All-Heaven Great Hall, the group of nascent divinity experts watched the scene with interest. Xiao Yan, Zhu Yi, and the others looked at each other with a slight smile on their faces. Lin Feng, who was sitting on the main seat, also smiled. He looked at the true disciples in the Great Law Hall and said, "Boys, do you think that only the disciples of the vast heaven sect are being tested? At the same time, it will also test your judgment and temperament." The other true disciples also began to enter their respective small worlds to compete. On the other hand, the desolate Heaven Valley's true disciples and their opponents were slightly hesitant. At this time, a dark-skinned young man stepped forward and walked toward one of the dueling grounds. It was Irosa from the Qian Tian Palace. His opponent was also a true disciple from the desolate Heaven Valley. Rosa was expressionless as he glanced at Su Yunsheng's group of 6 entering the quiet room. Over the years, he and Su Yunsheng had been the most outstanding disciples under Zhu Yi's tutelage. There were no signs of conflict between the two of them. However, in the competition 3 months ago, he had lost to Su Yunsheng by a hair's breadth and lost his seated spot in this competition. Now, it's just the beginning. Rosa let out a long breath and entered the competition ground. His opponent also entered with him. The moment they entered the competition ground, the roaring young beasts became restless. Moreover, the 10 roaring young beasts were all targeting Rosa's opponent. They completely ignored him. However, before these roaring young beasts could pounce on him, Rosa moved first. He formed a hand seal with his left hand and formed 2 fingers on his right hand. However, he didn't form a sword seal. Instead, he made a saber gesture as if he was throwing out a flying saber. A sharp black light flashed. In the next moment, the protective restriction of the Grand Law Hall was directly activated. Rosa's opponent sighed. "Senior brother, good move. I lost." He was already defeated before the 10 roaring young beasts could attack him. If this had happened outside the Grand Law Hall, he would have been killed by Rosa with a single slash. The cultivators from the other forces were in an uproar, especially the young geniuses who were preparing to compete with the disciples of Xianmen Tianzong. Although Rosa's opponent was a mid-stage foundation establishment cultivator, they were still shocked that he was instantly defeated the moment the competition began. "Big brother, that black light just now." A youth from the Lei family looked at a young man in his 20s beside him with lingering fear. The young man didn't look at Rosa. Instead, his attention fell on Shi Tianhao. His eyes flickered, and no one knew what he was thinking. However, although he didn't look, he knew what was going on in the competition field. He answered, "That is a divine ability that is completely compatible with his soul. It draws in the power of his soul and the essence, energy, and soul of his body. It can't be used frequently. He should also have a magic tool for the foundation establishment stage." This magic tool was personally refined by him. Whether it is his path, divine ability, or divine sense, it is incomparably compatible with him. For the foundation establishment stage, its power is not bad. It is specially used in conjunction with this divine ability to maximize its power. The power of this spell is not bad. His cultivation is also stronger than his opponent's, so it is not strange for him to have such a result. If he forms the Golden Elixir period and upgrades his magic tool to the Golden Elixir period, I would be interested to spar with him. Although the young man said it casually, the young cultivators beside him carefully recalled Rosa's attack and imagined themselves facing it. They couldn't help but feel a chill down their backs. Rosa's opponent was defeated in one move, which directly triggered the restrictions of the Spread Law Hall. Naturally, he couldn't stay in the competition field any longer. Rosa was sent out of the field, and the 10 dark young beasts that had been attacking him together suddenly lost their target. After a short moment of hesitation, they all pounced at Rosa, the only living person in the field. At this time, Rosa no longer continued to use the black blade light. Instead, he used the 8 arts of heaven and earth and the 8 trigrams fist to fight the dark young beasts. He was born in the grasslands, and hunting was his way of making a living from a young age. He was much more skilled in dealing with the dark young beasts than the others. Soon, he killed 3 dark young beasts and officially qualified to advance to the next round. Seeing Rosa leave the competition field expressionlessly, Xiao Huan smiled bitterly in the private room. "I feel that my position as a seated contestant should really be given to Rosa." Lu Xiaofeng gritted his teeth and turned to look at Su Yunsheng. He already knew this move 3 months ago. Su Yunsheng nodded. "Yes." Lu Xiaofeng gave him a thumbs up. "It really wasn't easy for you. I barely won by half a move. For a moment, I thought I would be the one who lost." Su Yunsheng said silently, "However, he is much stronger than 3 months ago. 3 months ago, he didn't seem to be able to do it so easily." Lu Xiaofeng smiled. "It seems that there is still a competition for the first seat of your Qian Tian Palace." Su Yunsheng smiled. "There might not be a result in this competition. Maybe it will be left hanging. Rosa is very strong. All of us direct disciples know that. Li Xingfei also looked at the competition field. On the other hand, although I already knew that Goldie would surpass him, his performance today was still somewhat unexpected. Even though he was surrounded by 10 dark young beasts, he was still at ease. It was as if he was playing a game. Zhuge Wanqiu smiled. Goldie seems to be changing every day. We are all very surprised by his fast improvement. She paused for a moment, then said softly, actually, in the minor competition 3 months ago, when the two of us fought for first place, I always felt that Goldie deliberately let me win first place. I just didn't dare to confirm it. Li Xingfei was surprised. Su Yunsheng, Lu Xiaofeng, and Zhao Huan also looked over in surprise. Zhuge Wanqiu said, however, I can be sure that he is now even stronger. In the desolate Sky Valley, Zhuge Wanqiu was the first to join. She had a high cultivation level and a gentle temper. When Huang Zhenting joined, he was only a 4 or 5-year-old kid. Shi Tianhao was a brat himself and didn't have the patience to be a nanny. Thus, most of the work of taking care of Huang Zhenting was done by Zhuge Wanqiu. To Huang Zhenting, Zhuge Wanqiu was like an elder sister. The two of them were very close. In the entire desolate Sky Valley, she was the only one who could speak to Huang Zhenting. Even if he was dissatisfied, he didn't dare to talk back. Among the 6 seated contestants, Su Yunsheng and the others communicated as usual. Only Zhou Yunsong stayed in the corner and didn't say a word. It was as if he was isolated from this world. Silently, he just looked at the people in the competition field. Through observing the process of their fights, he verified what he had learned and immersed himself in the world of Tao. Lu Xiaofeng occasionally glanced at Zhou Yunsong and sighed in his heart. It wasn't that they deliberately boycotted Zhou Yunsong, but Zhou Yunsong himself had a cold personality and didn't like to communicate with others. Among the disciples of the same generation, only Lu Xiaofeng could talk to him. However, 9 out of 10 sentences were said by Lu Xiaofeng. He only listened but didn't say anything. Su Yunsheng, Li Xingfei, and the others looked at Zhou Yunsong with complicated gazes. Li Xingfei used her transcendence energy to send a telepathic message to Lu Xiaofeng. I'm not worried about anything else, but how is junior martial brother Zhou's transcendence energy? After all, the top 16 in our internal competition will have to fight with the successors of other sects and forces. Although junior martial brother Zhou is also in the late stage of the foundation building realm, I'm afraid he doesn't have any actual combat experience in fights of magical powers, right? Zhou Yunsong usually lived in seclusion and rarely went out. He was a man of few words and was as cold as ice. Naturally, he didn't have good interpersonal relationships. Besides, he only cultivated under Yang Qing's tutelage and never fought with others. Apart from his cultivation level in the late stage of the foundation building realm, no one knew how powerful his transcendence energy was. They didn't even know what grade his pill cauldron was. This inevitably made Li Xingfei and the others feel uncertain. When Lu Xiaofeng heard Li Xingfei's question, a faint smile appeared on his face. His gaze wandered and he was actually a little absent-minded, as if he was recalling something. It was only when Li Xingfei looked at him with a strange expression that Lu Xiaofeng came back to his senses. He smacked his lips and said, I never lack actual combat experience in fights of magical powers. Li Xingfei looked surprised. Do you know something? Chapter 669. In response to Li Xingfei's question, Lu Xiaofeng avoided answering and only said with a smile, You will know very soon. Seeing that he didn't say anything, Li Xingfei didn't force him and said with a smile, Since you said so, I will wait and see. Inside the Great Law Hall, the young cultivators among the guests were all focused on the true disciples of Xianmen Tianzong during the competition. The results of the competition caused most people's expressions to become solemn. Apart from Huang Zhenting, Ying Rosa, and other outstanding talents, the true disciples of Xianmen Tianzong were all quite outstanding. In the face of the dangerous environment and the attacks of the dark young beasts, everyone performed well. The more difficult the conditions, the more one's true strength and potential could be seen. All of the defeated true disciples were defeated by their own sect members. None of them encountered danger because of the dark young beasts. The young cultivators watching the competition could clearly see the strength of the dark young beasts and wouldn't underestimate them. Many foundation establishment cultivators asked themselves, and they couldn't help but admit that if they were in the same dangerous environment as the dark young beasts, they wouldn't even be able to kill 3 dark young beasts if they were faced with a group of dark young beasts. Not to mention that they had to fight their opponents at the same time. If they weren't careful, they might die under the claws of the dark young beasts. The gazes of the Oris core stage cultivators were mostly focused on Dao Yuding. As one of the most popular participants in this competition, even though Dao Yuding's cultivation had been suppressed to the foundation establishment stage, she still appeared to be at ease. Just like Irosa, she had defeated her opponent in an instant and killed a sufficient number of Sunfire beasts. She seemed to be even more relaxed than Irosa. These cultivators of the Golden Elixir period were all wondering if it would be so easy for them to suppress their cultivation to the foundation establishment stage, or if they were in the foundation establishment stage when they were in the foundation establishment stage. The result of their pondering was not optimistic, and most people shook their heads. In the Heaven Desolate Valleys competition, most of their opponents chose the same method. First, he worked together with the Desolate Heaven Valley disciples. After the 2 of them killed most of the dark young beasts, they would fight to determine the victor. This action actually went against the original intention of Lin Feng, Shi Tianhao, and the others to add the roaring young beast to the battle. However, due to the special circumstances of the Heaven Barren Valley disciples, Lin Feng and the others secretly nodded when they saw this. There were some things that could be discussed, and some things that could not be discussed. Principles could not be compromised, but there were also priorities among principles. In a sense, the choice of these disciples was to deal with the external enemies first, and then deal with the internal conflicts. However, there was a precondition for this, and that was that only the Desolate Heaven Valley disciples could participate in the competition. There were other disciples who were not Desolate Heaven Valley's inheritors, but they also chose to work together to kill the dark young beast before deciding the winner. Under such circumstances, Lin Feng and the others would consider them to have passed, but their evaluation of them would be lowered. Flexibility and opportunism may seem the same, but they are fundamentally different. The rules did not prohibit such actions, but not being able to understand the purpose of the test from the elders was a sign of a lack of comprehension. For many things, using the same method when the conditions were different might not be correct. The so-called test was the judgment of the actual situation and the grasp of propriety. Sometimes, the slightest difference could result in a completely different result. This also involved a test of the disciples' judgment and decisiveness. The test was all around, all the time, and everywhere. At the same time, it was a comprehensive test and not just the outcome of the battle. The outcome of the battle only determined the ranking of the competition. The comprehensive test was the comprehensive evaluation of a disciple by Lin Feng, Shi Tianhao, Xiao Yan, and the others. This kind of thinking was not only seen through by the true inheritors of Xianmen Tianzong, but also by the young talents of the other factions. The cultivators of the younger generation were mainly observing the cultivation of the true inheritors of Xianmen Tianzong. The nascent soul stage patriarchs with higher cultivation levels could more or less understand it, because they usually had to inspect their own disciples. In addition to watching the competition, the attention of these Yuanying ancestors was also divided to other places. The venue for the Battle of Xianmen Tianzong was evolved from the upper space of the Spreading Law Hall. The lower space of the Spreading Law Hall was not idle either. Every small world in the upper space had a stream of light condensed from spirit chi, which fell into the lower space like a rope. Then, in the dim lower space, it turned into light shadows one after another. These light shadows were all humanoid figures, standing motionlessly in the lower space. Those who noticed these human figures couldn't help but murmur in their hearts, not knowing what these light shadows could do. In the All-Heaven Hall, the group of primordial divinity big shots also looked at the light shadows silently. After a while, Yan Mingyue said, "I remember it was mentioned before that the upper space is the battlefield, and the lower space is the training ground. Since it is called training, I think these light shadows have a function of assisting cultivation." Her eyes flickered, and she looked at Lin Feng. Mingyue, let me make a bold guess. Could it be that these light shadows record the Dharma spells of your disciples during the battle in the upper space, and then restore them so that your disciples can figure out the mistakes when they used the Dharma spells before? Lin Feng smiled slightly. These insignificant tricks can't hide from Fairy Yan's eyes. Yan Mingyue sighed in admiration. Sect leader Lin is too modest. This is not an insignificant trick. I think that not only will the actual battle in the battlefield be restored, but your disciples can also practice their Dharma spells and Dharma spells in the training ground, and then constantly correct themselves. It is equivalent to having an invisible teacher to guide them at all times. The other primordial divinity big shots also nodded. Yan Mingyue had said what they were thinking. Sword Venerable of the Thunderous and Sword Venerable of the Great Wilderness looked at each other and communicated telepathically. If every disciple can have this convenient condition, it will save a lot of trouble, and it will also greatly improve the overall level of Xianmen Tianzong. After all, this is not for an individual, but for many people at the same time. The practice of Dharma spells and Dharma spells also needed time. Understanding the mystery of Dharma spells, mastering the tricks, and increasing the proficiency level all needed time and correct guidance. The Hall of Spreading Law could meet this requirement. Sword Venerable of the Great Wilderness said slowly, in the past, everyone said that Xianmen Tianzong's foundation was not enough, but now it seems that Xianmen Tianzong is not what it used to be. Sword Venerable of the Thunderous nodded. Indeed. If it is only the Hall of Spreading Law, it is not a big deal. But you can see the big picture from the small. Everyone now understood why Lin Feng had previously ordered Shi Tianhao to open the lower training field only during the internal competition, and to close it during the communication spell with the young talents of other forces. If the training field and the fighting field were also opened at the same time, then the Dharma spells and secrets of the cultivators of other forces would also be recorded by the light and shadow figures in the training field. The Dharma spells that were too mysterious and profound might not be cracked, but most of the Dharma spells would be recorded and cracked, and then obtained by Xianmen Tianzong. Similarly, although the training field recorded the Dharma spells used by Huang Zhenting, Ying Rosa, and the others, the light and shadow figures in the lower training field were condensed. Obviously, they were only recording and explaining. After the cultivators of other forces left the mountain, the true disciples of Xianmen Tianzong would slowly come and watch. After the first round of the competition, half of the true disciples would be eliminated. The losers would return to the quiet room to recuperate, summarize their mistakes, and organize the experience gained from the battle, while the winners would go to the sect to replenish their magic power and mental strength. After resting, the second round of the competition would soon begin. In this round, the overall strength of both sides had increased by a level. Except for Dao Yuding, who still won easily, the others would not be able to win easily. Ying Rosa, Huang Zhenting, and the others would also have to spend a lot of effort to win. The number of young beasts in the competition field kept increasing, which also increased the difficulty of the competition. As the competition progressed, the outstanding cultivators of each cave abode gradually stood out. Generally speaking, a complex competition environment would increase the chances of an upset. However, under the guidance of Lin Feng, Xianmen Tianzong, from the very beginning, taught the disciples to try their best to adapt to all kinds of complex and ever-changing situations. Therefore, under such an educational philosophy, the strong cultivators who were originally popular would have a stronger ability to face complex environments, because they were all talented in this aspect. Other than Dao Yuding, Huang Zhenting, and Ying Rosa, Burning Heaven Cliff's Yan Wuwei, and Snow Wind Valley's Ku Jing had also broken through. The only pity was a young girl named Sun Shuer from the Heavenly Heaven Palace. Her cultivation was also extraordinary. She was born with ice muscles, ice bones, and ice marrow. She was a natural genius in the Tao of ice, diligent, filial, and modest, and had a good relationship with many people in the sect. This girl was originally a strong contender for the top 16, but in the last round of 32, she ran into Dao Yuding, and the result was self-evident. She could only regretfully lose, which made many disciples of Xianmen Tianzong feel sorry for her. In the All Heavens Palace, Xiao Yan, Yu Hongyan, and the others shook their heads regretfully. It's a pity for Shuer. If she didn't run into Yuding, Ing Rosa, and Goldie, she would have had a high chance of advancing to the top 16. Zhu Yi smiled slightly. It doesn't matter, she has already benefited a lot from this competition. Xiao Yan suddenly chuckled. Speaking of which, third junior brother, your sect is a little overpopulated with women and underpopulated with men. Hearing this, Wang Lin was stunned for a moment, then laughed involuntarily. As it turned out, a total of 3 disciples from his sect had advanced to the top 16. In the end, it was actually a female army. Other than Dao Yuding and Li Xingfei, there was only one mid-stage foundation building disciple left, and she was also a female. All the male disciples from his sect had been annihilated. Zhu Yi, Yu Hongyan, Yang Qing, and Luo Qingwu also shook their heads and laughed, while Li Yuanfang turned to look at them, as if he didn't understand why everyone was laughing. Tong performed well, said Wang Lin with a smile. Hearing this, Xiao Yan was immediately happy. Of course, she is my goddaughter. At this time, in the Spreading Law Hall, in a competition field, stood a 7 or 8-year-old girl. She was snow-white and cute, with 2 sheep horn braids. Looking at the fiendish roaring young beast in front of her, she made a face, so ugly. The little girl was Lin Tong. Chapter 670. Although Lin Tong was young, she had already displayed outstanding strength in the first few rounds of the competition. She had defeated her opponents and killed all of the Sunfire beasts. Some of the spectators with higher cultivations were slightly stunned. They could already see that her foundation was extraordinary. This young lady looks like she's a spirit monster and not a human, the bigwigs muttered inwardly. In the private room, Marquis Jing Huanho stared closely at Lin Tong. After a while, he let out a long sigh. I see. So the Wudong tree heart that landed in the hands of the master of the Mystic Gate has taken human form. I wonder when the Wudong tree heart took human form. If it had already taken human form before the Phoenix race arrived, then there might be a hidden story that deviated from my expectations. Marquis Jing Huanho drummed his fingers on the table and shook his head. He looked at the 2 people beside him. Xiangheng, Wang Lu, have you found your target? The tall youth called Wang Lu shook his head slowly. I haven't found him among those who have participated in the competition so far. The round-faced youth called Xiangheng answered, it looks like there are 3 possibilities. Either this person didn't participate in the competition at all, or he's one of the 6 seeded contestants, or he participated in the competition but held back his strength. Marquis Jing Huanho waved his hand. The first possibility might not exist. All of Xianmen Tianzong's true disciples participated in the competition this time. As for those 6 little things, as far as I know, 5 of them are already famous outside. Furthermore, they all entered the sect during the last 2 opening ceremonies of the Celestial Sect of Wonders. Only the person called Zhou Yunsong entered the sect alone in the past 3 years. So the person you're looking for is either this Zhou Yunsong or someone who has participated in the competition but hasn't exposed themselves. Wang Lu and Xiangheng nodded. That's right. I hope he didn't purposefully lose and get eliminated for the sake of keeping his identity a secret. That way, we'll have a chance to find him during the exchange later. Marquis Jing Huanho smiled indifferently. How would Xianmen Tianzong know the master is looking for this person? They won't go out of their way to keep it secret. It wasn't just Jing Huanho, Wang Lu, Xiangheng, and the others. The other spectators were also paying close attention to the performance of the Xianmen Tianzong disciples. The further the competition progressed, the higher the standard of the disciples who broke through the tight encirclement, and the more valuable the dual competition became. Many elders and powerhouses of various forces would take the opportunity of watching the battle to give pointers to their juniors. In the Celeritas Sword Sect's camp, Ancestor Violet Cloud solemnly said to his own disciples, you all have to pay attention to this little girl. Maybe in the future she'll be another Shi Tianhao. Her potential is truly too enormous. Everyone nodded their heads in unison as they stared fixedly at little Lin Tong, who was in the middle of the competition grounds. His entire body was surging with a milky white flame that was pure and righteous, capable of suppressing all evil. Wherever the flame passed, more than 10 roaring young beasts would retreat in fear. The milky white flame seemed weak and not scorching, but as long as it touched the roaring young beast, it would immediately howl in pain. This was precisely the divine ability of the pure young true fire. Roaring young beasts are monsters formed from the evil energy of the Swanni. One of the things they fear the most in their lives is the pure young true fire. The environment they were in right now was similar to the Swanni race's dwelling. In this kind of dangerous environment, the roaring young beast was actually like a fish in water, endlessly replenishing its own strength. If an ordinary cultivator used the pure young true fire, they might not be able to effectively restrain it. But Lin Tong just happened to be formed from the Wudong tree heart. In this world, apart from the phoenix race, it is the divine Wudong tree that is most proficient in controlling this ancestor of all flames. Although Lin Tong was young, after experiencing the baptism of the Wudong tree monarch in the Wudong forest and also receiving Xiao Yan's wholehearted guidance, she was already rather proficient in controlling the pure young true fire. Whenever she participated in the competition, the roaring young beasts didn't dare to approach. In the Cellerita's sword sect's camp sat a beautiful white-clothed girl. On her delicate earlobes hung a green jade pendant, slightly shaking it emitted a clear jade sound. Ancestor Violet Cloud looked towards this white-clothed girl and secretly sighed. The white-clothed girl noticed Ancestor Violet Cloud's gaze and smiled faintly. Elder Violet Cloud, please be at ease. Yanran can take care of her own position. She was precisely Murong Yanran from back then. After being defeated by Xiao Yan on the cloud-traversing peak back then, she instead profited from her misfortune and became the personal disciple of Sword Venerable Flowing Light. Afterwards she has always been cultivating in seclusion on the cloud-traversing peak. Originally Sword Venerable Flowing Light and the Cellerita's sword sect had the idea of letting Murong Yanran train bitterly and become a talent, then go find Xiao Yan to regain face. But afterwards, along with the relationship between the two powers gradually becoming harmonious, after Xianmen Tianzong's prestige became more and more grand, naturally the matter was left unsettled. The present Xiao Yan is also long since no longer that rising star of the golden elixir initial stage. If the him at that time needed Murong Yanran to look up to him, now even looking up to him she can't even see his silhouette clearly. The Cellerita's sword sect's most outstanding genius of the younger generation, Tao Yaoyao, previously paid a visit and sparred with Xiao Yan and was instantly defeated. The Qin dynasty's crown prince Shi Chongyun, who wanted to make things difficult for Xiao Yan on the cloud-traversing peak, is now also no match for Xiao Yan. Even the entire Cellerita's sword sect from top to bottom, if not for Sword Venerable Flowing Light holding down the fort, Xiao Yan alone can wipe them out. Long before the Battle of West Hill City 3 years ago, Murong Yanran already knew the gap between her and today's Xiao Yan. These few years she has long since straightened out her mentality. This time she will also participate in the spell exchange, but her opponent is no longer Xiao Yan but Xiao Yan's disciples. Such a huge gap. If she can't adjust her mentality, then it is enough to make people depressed to the point of going crazy. Murong Yanran's gaze turned towards the competition field, her expression calm, but her figure in the eyes of her fellow disciples more or less somewhat lonely. The winner of this competition is still Lin Tong. She also obtained the last place in the top 16. Leaving the competition field, Lin Tong cheerfully jogged all the way. She did not return to her quiet room to rest but instead leapt into another light door. Sitting in the room is a woman with a peerlessly beautiful appearance, wearing a light green robe with a purple belt lightly tied around her waist. She smiled as she looked at the door. As soon as little Lin Tong entered the door she flew into her embrace. Mother. Xiao Zhen, smiled as she hugged her, lightly scraping the bridge of her nose. Tong, is so amazing. Lin Tong giggled and said, Tong, naturally can't lose face for grandpa, father, and mother. Hearing the words, grandpa, and father, Xiao Zhen couldn't help but burst into laughter. She naturally knows that Lin Tong is referring to Lin Feng and Xiao Yan. If Xiao Yan was here every time he heard these words he wouldn't be able to help but correct, it's grandpa and godfather. Tong, you have to be careful from now on. Once you enter the top 16, you will have to compete with the cultivators from the other sections. Xiao Zhen helped Lin Tong untie the small braid on her head and comb her hair again. Lin Tong comfortably leaned in her embrace. Mother, don't worry, Tong will definitely perform well. Watching Lin Tong run into Xiao Zhen's quiet room, Zhao Huan smiled, looked at Lu Xiaofeng and said, Senior Marshal Brother Lu Xia, are you under a lot of pressure? Lu Xiaofeng shrugged, of course, it's so heavy that my small arms and legs can't hold it anymore. He glanced at Li Xingfei beside him and said with a smile, just like you and Senior Marshal Sister Dao, little Junior Marshal Sister didn't participate in the cave house's internal competition at all. Otherwise, she would be standing here right now while I'm fighting with the dark young beast in the fighting arena. Other than Zhuge Wanqiu and Zhou Yunsong, Lu Xiaofeng, Su Yunsheng, Li Xingfei, and Zhao Huan were the first batch of direct disciples. They were also the most familiar with each other. Towards Lu Xiaofeng's teasing, Li Xingfei smiled slightly, yes, our luck is quite good. Zhao Huan moved closer to Lu Xiaofeng. Senior Marshal Brother Lu Xia, Junior Marshal Sister Tong inherited Great Marshal Uncle's pure yang real fire, what about you? What kind of real fire do you cultivate? I heard that you Fentianya disciples can choose a real fire to cultivate after you build your foundation. Lu Xiaofeng didn't hide it and nodded, that's right, I cultivate the sun real fire. Xiao Yan had 5 great real fires. After his direct disciples reached the foundation building stage, they would cultivate his Dao technique, burning sky technique. During the cultivation process, they could also cultivate another fire attribute Dao technique and choose a real fire to cultivate. As they cultivated, they would gradually turn it into their own divine power. Other than the Great Sun Brilliant Heaven Canon, Xiao Yan had been constantly summarizing and perfecting the other real fires in the past 3 years. There were also Dao technique manuals for the other real fires, namely the Nether Brilliant Scripture, the Mysterious Heaven Calamity Scripture, and the Pure Yang True Technique. The ancient emperor's Li Fire God technique was passed down to him by Xiao Zhen. It was inconvenient for Xiao Yan to directly include it in the category of Xianmen Tianzong's Dao technique. Thus, he comprehended the Nan Ming Li fire by himself, constantly pondering and summarizing, and finally came up with the Nan Ming Orthodox technique. Just like the Golden Crow clan's Sun Real Fire technique and Xianmen Tianzong's Great Sun Brilliant Heaven Canon, both cultivated the Sun Real Fire, the Nan Ming Orthodox technique and the Li Fire God technique, both cultivated the Nan Ming Li fire. However, they were 2 completely different Dao techniques, but in the end, they reached the same destination by different means. Lu Xiaofeng obtained the fire seed of the Sun Real Fire from Xiao Yan, then cultivated the Great Sun Brilliant Heaven Canon, and cultivated the Li Fire God technique, and finally controlled a ball of Sun Real Fire. Normally, it could be used to nourish one's cultivation, and when fighting, it was the sharpest weapon. Although the pure Yang True Fire was pure and vast, it was not sharp when used in fights of magical powers. The Nether Evil Flame was the fiercest, but it was also the hardest to control. The mysterious Heaven Tribulation Flame was even more unpredictable. If one was not careful, they would hurt themselves before hurting the enemy. Therefore, among the 5 top Dao techniques, most disciples cultivated the Great Sun Brilliant Heaven Canon, and Nan Ming Orthodox technique. As they were chatting, suddenly, Shi Tianhao's voice sounded in their ears, now, in the competition of our direct disciples, the top 16 have all been determined. Now, the top 16, gather in front of me. Lu Xiaofeng, Su Yunsheng, and the others looked at each other, then they all walked out from the light door, left the quiet room, and came to the Spreading Law Hall's arena. The direct disciples who were eliminated before were now resting in the quiet room, organizing their gains from the previous battles, and silently waiting for the next battles to begin. They also had to watch carefully, to verify what they had learned. At this time, Shi Tianhao lightly clapped his hands, and the many small worlds created by the arena all disappeared. Other than him, in the vast arena, there were 16 Xianmen Tianzong direct disciples standing neatly. They were the top 16 of this competition. Shi Tianhao looked around, looked at the many light doors in the Spreading Law Hall, and said, "The next battles will be combined with the exchange of the fellow Taoists, and they will be carried out together. According to the performance of the exchange, the final ranking of the top 16 direct disciples will be decided. Fellow Taoists, disciples and successors, if you are interested, please enter now." Chapter 671. In the battle arena, besides Shi Tianhao who was the host, there were the 16 successive disciples of Xianmen Tianzong. The 3 from the Inferno Precipice, Lin Tong, Lu Xiafeng and Yan Wuwei. The 4 from the Heavenly Temple, besides Su Yunsheng and Ing Luozha, there were 2 other intermediate foundation establishment stage disciples. The 3 from the Forest Abode, Dao Yuding, Li Xingfei, and a female disciple. The 3 from the Blizzard Valley, Zhao Huan, Ke Jing, and another intermediate foundation establishment stage disciple. The Nirvana world only had Zhou Yun Song, whereas the Wasteland Valley had Zhuge Wanqiu and Huang Zhenting. Because of the Wuyang beast, the Wasteland Valley disciples were under a lot of pressure. In the end, only the 2 of them stood out. The Heavenly Temple, which had the largest number of successive disciples, took 4 of the 16 spots. If not for Sun Xue's bad luck and her encounter with Dao Yuding, the Heavenly Temple could have taken 5 of the 16 spots. Silently, the young talents from the various great powers who came to watch the competition were sizing up the 16 successive disciples of Xianmen Tianzong. At the same time, they communicated with their companions and discussed. "Senior, what do you think? They are very strong, but I am not confident. The disciples of Xianmen Tianzong are indeed extraordinary." As the bunch of them were discussing, Shi Tianhao announced that the internal competition and social gathering of Xianmen Tianzong would be held together. Everyone was a little taken aback and looked at one another. Some of them were a little anxious, but many of them were eager to try. The disciples of the Celestial Sect of Wonders were very powerful. Lin Feng himself and the Celestial Sect of Wonders were even more powerful. However, the more this was so, the more these arrogant young talents felt the urge to challenge them. It was different from when Xianmen Tianzong was just formed. Now, defeating the disciples of Xianmen Tianzong was a huge honor. Xianmen Tianzong was like the Taishu Temple and the Mount Shu Sword Sect. They stood at the peak of the cultivation world in the Divine Land, waiting for other powers to challenge them. In the camp of the Great Qin Empire, Shi Jingyun, who was only 11 or 12 years old, jumped up from her seat and laughed, "Ha, this is great. I can't wait." Beside Shi Jingyun, a youth in a yellow robe stood up. He was handsome, but there was a demonic look in his eyes. Shi Xingyun turned around and glanced at him. With a solemn expression, she warned, "Shao Qian, if you mess up again this time, I won't be able to protect you from Prince Anliang anymore. He will definitely ground you for life." The youth in the yellow robe was Shi Shaogan, the grandson of Shi Zongyue, who caused a stir at the spiritual conference of Huanghai. Shi Shaogan's cultivation was not bad. He was one of the most outstanding talents in the younger generation of the Great Qin Empire. But in some matters, his way of thinking was different from others. This caused the entire Great Qin Empire to have a headache. More than once, his grandfather, Shi Zongyue, had wanted to slap this disgraceful grandson of his to death. After hearing Shi Xingyun's words, Shi Shaogan nodded his head seriously. "Sister, don't worry. If I meet someone I like this time, I will keep a low profile and ask for her hand in marriage. I won't do it in public." As Shi Xingyun heard this, she touched her forehead and started to think seriously. Bringing Shi Shaogan out this time was a huge mistake. Sister, how do you think Xianmen Tianzong will arrange this social gathering?" Shi Jingyun asked curiously. "Don't tell me we have to kill the Wuyang beasts and fight with the disciples of Xianmen Tianzong at the same time?" Shi Xingyun did not speak. Shi Shaogan shook his head. "I don't think so. If not, Shi Tianhao would not have to keep the competition grounds. He could just continue using them." Besides being a little funny in some aspects, Shi Shaogan was very normal most of the time. He was also one of the rising stars of the Great Qin Empire. Shi Jingyun pouted her lips. "Then how are we going to compete?" "We will know later." Since we are here to participate in this social gathering, we should just follow the rules. As long as the rules are fair, we can accept even if they are weird. Shi Xingyun said, Xianmen Tianzong's previous competition tested the disciples' ability to react to sudden changes. Don't tell me you can't do the same. Shi Jingyun shook her head hurriedly, of course not. Shi Xingyun laughed, that's why. Instead of letting your imagination run wild, why don't you observe your opponents? The 6-seeded contestants have not fought before this. That's why it's hard to judge them directly. But since they are the winners of the previous competition, they will not be weak. Shi Xingyun analyzed for her brothers and sisters. Among those who have actually fought, Dao Yuding is undoubtedly the first. Of course, if we really want to talk about it, she is the first among all of them. After all, she is the only Aurus core stage cultivator, and a mid-Aurus core stage cultivator at that. Xiao Qian. Shi Xingyun glanced at Shi Shaogan. The way he looked at Dao Yuding was a little weird, just like how he looked at the spiritual conference of Huanghai. Sister, I've said before. I won't do that in public. Shi Shaogan turned his head and looked at Shi Xingyun, as if he did not understand why she was staring at him. Shi Xingyun looked at Shi Shaogan deeply and revealed a smile on her face. In any case, remember this. This is your last chance. If you mess up again, you can forget about leaving Prince Anliang's residence until you reach the immortal soul stage. Shi Shaogan suddenly felt a chill down his spine. He seemed to recall the stern face of his grandfather. Other than Dao Yuding, that little guy called Huang Zhenting, and that youth called Ing Luozha who obviously has the blood of the other tribes in the grassland, as well as that little girl with the pure yang primordial fire, are not to be underestimated. Seeing that Shi Shaogan had settled down, Shi Xingyun continued, the standards for the disciples of Xianmen Tianzong are also very high. There are many talented people in the sect. You have to buck up. After pausing for a while, Shi Xingyun continued, although we are not clear about the rules of the competition, besides the disciples of Xianmen Tianzong, you may meet opponents from other powers. Shi Xingyun raised 3 fingers and said, from what I know, you have to be careful of 3 people. Qin Xingyu from the Taishu Temple, Lei Jie from the Lei family. As Shi Xingyun was speaking, Shi Shaogan frowned and said, Lei Jie is here too. Shi Xingyun did not express her displeasure at his interruption. Instead, she nodded and said, that's right. Lei Jie, who was praised by the Lei family as the 10,000 miles dragon horse, will also participate in this spiritual conference. Shi Shaogan frowned and did not continue speaking. Lei Jie was the most outstanding talent in the younger generation of the Lei family. However, he was not well known. This was not because he was not strong enough. On the contrary, his talent and potential were extremely shocking. There was only one reason why he was not well known. That was because the man of Polychoria, Shi Tianyi, was too dazzling. Therefore, Lei Jie, who was also from the Lei family, was completely overshadowed. However, in reality, those who were familiar with the situation in the Great Qin Empire acknowledged that Lei Jie was only second to Shi Tianyi among his peers. Of course, there was another person who overshadowed him now. That person was Shi Tianhao, who killed Shi Tianyi and was stronger than all of them. However, if Shi Tianyi and Shi Tianyi were not included, Lei Jie was the most outstanding talent in the younger generation of the Great Qin Empire. Speaking of which, he could be considered to be from the Great Zhou Empire. Although Shi Jingyun had heard of Lei Jie's name before, she did not have a deep understanding of it. She had also never seen Lei Jie in action. Therefore, she smiled and asked, Sister, who is the third person? The third person is called Yang Likuan, Shi Jingyun said. He is the successor of the path of the heaven-born of the Samsara sect, the immediate disciple of the heavenly cloud holy man, Shin Qifeng. In the elegant room where the path of the heaven-born of the Samsara sect were, a few cultivators stood up. However, everyone followed closely behind one of them and walked out of the door. That person was short and fat. When he moved, the fat on his body jiggled and he looked rather stupid. However, the other path of the heaven-born of the Samsara sect hurriedly made way for him. The junior disciples looked at him with fear in their eyes. This fatty who looked as stupid as a pig had a pair of small eyes that flashed with a ferocious radiance. Not only did the junior cultivators like Du Ting avoid him, even Meng Bei revealed a fearful look as he looked at this person. As if he noticed their gazes, the fatty rolled his eyes. What are you looking at? Some trash embarrassed the Samsara sect. I am going to get it back for all of you. I am cleaning up the mess for the few of you. Do you understand? Du Ting lowered his head and did not dare to make a sound. Meng Bei's face turned red, but he did not dare to say anything. Only the white-robed elder in the Yuanying stage creased his brows. Yang Likuan, watch your words. The fatty turned his head and glared at the white-robed old man with his small eyes. He didn't continue to speak, but he also didn't have any intention of apologizing. He let out a strange laugh and swaggered off, causing the white-robed old man's face to turn green with anger. Shi Jingyun, Shi Shaoqian, Yang Likuan and the rest came out from their respective quiet rooms. They came to the battle arena of the Dharma Hall. Shi Tianhao swept his gaze across them and said with a smile, this social gathering is not just a simple competition. The spiritual conference is split into 3 stages. Shi Tianhao conjured a spell with his right hand and a streak of mana shot out. It landed in the Dharma Hall. The first stage is not a one-on-one battle. After everyone is split into groups, the members of each group will work together to achieve the goal. The scenery in the Dharma Hall changed again. Countless rays of light shot into the sky. The ceiling of the hall seemed to have disappeared and converted into a vast starry sky. The starlight gathered and twisted, converting into a pagoda that seemed to be made up entirely of starlight. The top of the pagoda could not be seen. The upper half of the pagoda seemed to have merged with the sea of stars and the universe. The goal is to climb to the top of this pagoda. The faster the better. Shi Tianhao glanced at the crowd and saw that some of the cultivators from the other great powers had disapproving looks in their eyes. Shi Tianhao laughed and continued, the grouping isn't based on who is from the same sect. Instead, it's completely messed up. In every group, there can't be more than 2 people from the same sect. Everyone opened their eyes wide. Shi Tianhao smiled and said, that's right. Cultivators from different sects will form a team. The individual results will be tied to the team they are in. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.